I used to measure days by clock-in codes and break-room microwaves. After the red rain, I started measuring by what I could carry without losing my breath. The rain fell like a dare, brown-red, sticky as a lie. Not everywhere, just enough that roads turned to ribbons that no longer agreed with maps. Headlines argued while the grid blinked like a tired god and then stopped pretending. A week later, we learned the rain had been bloom and spore and something that woke inside the things that needed warmth more than they needed sense. We named them because naming a monster makes it feel like an employee. The hollowed, the drowse, slow posture like a marionette owned by gravity. The stitchers, fast, drawn to aluminum screech and glass scream, and the sounds we didn't know we loved making until they started bringing teeth. A day after the substation died for good, I found a ledger in the jacket pocket of a dead surveyor slumped against a survey tripod like a man apologizing to a job. Weatherproof cover, grease pencil entries, title on the first page in a neat hand, Atlas of Absences. He'd been mapping what wasn't there. Streetlights out, bridges down, intersections empty at rush hour. The future sometimes hides in negative space. I kept the book. I kept his pencil. I kept his rule written on page 1. Rule 1, map the holes. A missing thing is a path if you know how to read it. My sister, Juniper, was south by the coast in a town called Anchor. We didn't say home out loud when we talked about it. We'd been told not to jinx good things when we were kids and grew up in a house where the power bill was more threatening than thunder. The last message from her was a picture of a pier under a sky that was practicing being kind and the words, safe for now. I held the picture like a relic and decided the distance between us would be my job from now on. I'm recording this into a little black recorder I found at the bottom of a pawn shop drawer full of dead batteries that weren't dead enough. If you can hear me, it means the tower I haven't seen yet is still breathing and the air above it is still willing to carry noise. I'll tell you the rules I learned the hard way and the ones I borrowed from smarter ghosts. Rule 2. Sound is scent. Don't drag it behind you. Rule 3. Light is a knife. Draw it only on purpose. Rule 4. Make promises your legs can carry. If you find an X over 2 short lines with a bar beneath them, looks like a ladder with a belt, that's my mark. 2 lines and an anchor. Aye, that's me saying, safe to pass, not to stay. I'll explain as we go. We'll start at the lab where I stopped being an employee and became a person who keeps their shoes on when they sleep. Chapter 1. Below the noise line, the lab had smelled like coffee and aspirational whiteboards until the day diesel replaced everything. We'd barricaded with lab benches and wished we had taken shop class seriously. Upstairs, the hollowed bumped into plexiglass they didn't have the patience to learn, hands red with the rain's idea of religion. Downstairs, a generator coughed itself into usefulness and then into suspicion. We can outlast this, the director had said, and I watched everyone try to pretend that was a sentence with a period at the end and not a comma and a cliff. On the 4th day, I went to the roof to stretch the air into my lungs and saw the freeway like a silver ribbon of forgiveness, empty. The absence hummed. The absence told me a story I understood in my bones. Move under the line where the sound carries. Stay below the guardrails. The hollowed listen upward by habit. I left at night with a pack that was more conviction than gear. It held water in bottles that could be crushed to keep from crackling, a short pry bar, a roll of tape, a coil of cord, iodine, a sewing kit, a pair of socks wrapped in a bandana like a gift, a folding saw with more honesty than the knife I'd kept for years without ever needing to use it, 4 candles, 2 tea lights, a pocket of dry lint inside a zip bag, a map folded to a page that had stopped being true. Rule 5. Carry quiet things. If it clinks, pad it. If it rattles, fix it or leave it. Getting out was not heroic. I used the freight elevator shaft, doors pried, cable severed. I lowered myself with a belt through a figure-8 made from a lab stool base and not enough shame. At the bottom, a laundry room. Sheets turned ghostly by my headlamp's rationed glow. Through a service door, into alley, into dark. The first block I moved like I was balancing a bowl on my head. On the second, I went to ground behind a delivery van and listened. Someone tried a car alarm 2 streets over. That sound used to mean the cops. Now it meant confetti. The hollowed came in a sugar rush, fast first, then slower, then a daisy chain of hunger. The sound shut off. The noise didn't. Rule 6, don't test whether a thing draws them. Assume it does. I kept the interstate on my left but didn't climb to it. The embankment held brush that knew how to hide small mammals and wanted to be useful again. I obliged. I moved along the sound shadow cast by the concrete mass above. When traffic stops forever, you learn how far a road's ghost can carry. It's farther than I thought. At the interchange, the sky pinked, a tired coin coming up. The city's throat cleared and stalled. I crawled into the guts of a sign with a hollow post and set a watch. 20 minutes, awake. 20, staring at the inside of my eyelids, map under my fingers, trainer, laces under my thumbs, so my hands would learn to always know where they were. Rule 7. Touch your exits before you need them. Stairs, windows, ladders. Hands remember what eyes forget under adrenaline. I slept enough to be a person who could walk another hour. Under an overpass, a blue tarp flapped like a tired flag. A hand-painted phrase across it read, "Quiet is kind." I took the tarp when I could do it without sound, folded it, strapped it slashwise across my pack. A kid's mitten was under it, red and small. I put it in my pocket because I have a superstition that lost small things want to be carried somewhere else before they agree to be lost. The first mark I left was on a jersey barrier, where a gap would take a body without breaking it. I used the grease pencil and drew 2 lines and a bar beneath them, small, at knee height, where helpers see and performers don't. Rule 8. Mark low. People who look up for danger miss the quiet maps. By noon, I was out where the interstate becomes a promise to get you to someone else's problem. I went down into neighborhoods where porches remembered laughter and then stopped pretending. Smoke rose over the strip 5 blocks over, not thick, a house on its quiet way to being a learning experience. I didn't go see. The first hollowed. I met alone was sitting on a curb facing away from me as if the day had arrived behind it and it wasn't ready to turn around. The red on its hairline made it look like someone had painted a crown badly. I circled wide. It lifted its head, listening, not to me, to a cat in a trash can 3 houses down. The cat got away because cats have always been the smartest ones here. Rule 9. If something else can draw them, let it. Better a cat's arrogance than your fear. I moved until the air learned afternoon and the shadows lengthened into knives. A culvert offered a bed, so I negotiated with it. I would be its bad fish for a day. It would pretend not to echo. I slept with my head on the pack and my feet on the wall, a posture I learned from first shifts and last buses. At dusk, wind brought machine breath, a generator. Not a hospital hum, a smaller animal. I tasted the air hunched by a stand of chain link until the noise wrote a map. Storage units, orange doors. The sound came from a bay where the door was cracked, like a smile you don't trust. I didn't go in, but I watched the shadow beyond the door move in a way that wasn't the hollowed. Pauses that meant hands, checks that meant rules. A lantern blinked twice, then once, slow. Answer from farther in, twice, then once, a code. Too simple to be the choir. The choir likes performances. This was work. Rule 10. If someone uses a code you don't know, don't audition. Learn it another day.
Leave a mark for anyone who will. I scratched a glow on the center post and kept to my culvert, and let other people be the noise. A bridge will teach you how big the river is.
The map lies, the water doesn't. I reached the black line before noon. The river cut the city's north from the county's south like a chalk mark that had always been there. We just pretended it hadn't. The main span was a parking lot of surrender, cars angled like a school of fish that forgot how to be team. The choir had been here. You could tell by the cans tied under bumpers and the glass bottles strung with fishing line that sang when the wind asked, and the banner that used to be a bedsheet and now read, "Sing and be saved." Their saved looks like bait to me. Rule 11. If salvation has a sound system, leave. The underbridge service walkway was my way. It would be slick. It would be close. It would be a place where sound gets nervous.
I found a maintenance hatch and a ladder that had learned Rust's language.
I taped my boots. I wrapped the buckles that liked to chat. I breathed slow until my heartbeat agreed to be counted. Halfway across, the choir did what they always do. Performed. On the main deck, a man in a suit that had survived better decades lifted a bullhorn and recited his god's commentary on the weather. His acolytes banged a rhythm poorly. The hollowed came.
Of course they did.
Noises smell. Up they went, over the cars, into their own confusion, a knot of hunger and old hymns. The suit never saw me. He didn't look down. He never does. I kept my hands on the rail and my feet on the grid, and thought of Juniper's picture of the pier. The walkway had a gap where a panel had been stolen to make something else before the city stopped describing theft and started describing home repair. I laid my body across the hole and felt the river talk its cold talk inches below my ribs.
I made my legs be friendlier than they wanted to be.
Made it touch steel. Moved on. At the far side, a guard cage hung at an angle, padlocked like a joke.
Inside, a pile of cans.
Not beans, nails, screws, washers, a jar of the good bolts. The choir's hymn is glass and metal. I took one washer and left a piece of wrapped chocolate and drew "Be slow" on the inside of the guardrail where no one but a maintenance person would ever see it. I came up in a maze of storage yards and forklifts that would never lift again. In the corner of one, a dog watched me through a V in chain link.
Ribs like a map, eyes like a book.
I crouched and held out a hand with a piece of jerky and didn't look at him while he decided. He took it with dignity, retreated 2 dog lengths, lay down, and watched me. "You don't owe me anything," I told him, "because that's part of the terms." Rule 12. When you pay tribute to a dog, don't call it charity. It's a treaty. At dusk I found the signal bridge, the one the Atlas of Absences had circled 3 times. "Remote relay dormant?" said the note. The relay wasn't dead. It was drunk. Solar panel half shadowed by a billboard for a soda that would never sponsor anything again. The billboard said, "Be louder." I took it personally. I climbed the billboard, peeled back a panel with a pry bar, slid the solar clean of winter's excuses, re-angled the frame with a ratchet that protested but then did its job with pride. Down at the relay box, a light that had been shy turned bold. I listened, static. Then a voice, 3 towns away if I guessed by the way the air tastes between vowels. "Lantern Union calls, night burn at mile 112, the glass lamp house. Quiet approach. No engines after dusk. Code 121. Rule 13. If you find the people who light the dark on purpose, you treat them like water. You don't waste them." I wrote 112 glass on my wrist in grease pencil and drew chaos on the relay post.
A lantern is not a promise. It's a test you take with your teeth clenched. I was going to take it. It was 4 days to 112 if I moved like water. 2 if I moved like an ambulance. I don't do ambulances. I followed the absences. Once I turned off a road because it had tire marks and turned onto a ditch because it was full of footprints
that went one way and came back less numerous. The ditch smelled like frogs and mercy. Rule 14. Tire tracks are big talkers. Footprints are honest. On the second morning, a woman stepped into the road 20 yards ahead of me and put a hand palm out. The gesture was mother and traffic cop both. She wore a mechanic's jacket, grease like a flag. Her other hand rested on a tool belt where a hammer lived.
Not a gun. I liked her without meaning to. You walk like an apology, she said. That's good, Cora. She didn't ask my name. I don't know if I would have given it or if I would have said a false one and then hated myself for it. Lantern?
I said instead, nodding at the open box on the ground behind her, where a bottle of lamp oil sat next to a handled lantern, wrapped in burlap, like a baby. Union, she said. We keep the glass from becoming bait. People like to light things at night because it makes them feel brave. Bravery is loud.
Loud is death.
We do controlled burns. We paint the light small. You can come if you can keep your shoes from betraying you. We moved through a tangle of backyards where trampoline frames had become trellises and a swing hung dead still. Cora moved like a person who had learned her body after a bad accident and liked it better now because every part was chosen. At the lamp house, I learned why they called it the glass. 3 stories of windows wrapped the top level, a lighthouse in a town that had forgotten the word coast. 100 hands had painted the panes with mud and soot in patterns that turned the light into a whisper. Inside, 5 of them. All wore the mechanic jacket. No patches, no flags, just hands that had learned to keep devices alive. They checked knots. They checked shutters. They talked without talking. Cora handed me a bottle with a rag stuffed into its mouth. Not for throwing, she said. We burn the fumes cold. The smell is our way to talk to the air. The hollow don't like it. We make a line and we stand on the side where the wind doesn't turn us into the lesson. We burned a line at the road's edge, not for heat, for border. The smell was chemical and memory, high school shop class, the inside of a lawnmower shed, the taste of fear when you breathe in at the wrong time. The light at the lamp house blinked 121, the union's code for intake. I blinked it back with a tiny flashlight I had taped into a hood of aluminum foil so it would behave. A family came out of the trees at the call. They did everything right, hands up, pace measured, eyes on the people and not the building. Cora counted with 2 fingers behind her thigh where the family couldn't see it. 3,
4, 5.
She nodded to me. She nodded to the lantern. She nodded to the 2 men in the mezzanine near the old Fresnel who hadn't moved and who I had read as a sculpture.
Nothing happened.
That was the point. Rule 15, a quiet welcome is twice as loud in the right ears. We fed them stew and shut the light. We scraped soot from the panes and repainted it with a pattern that had a geometry I didn't know and didn't need to.
Cora didn't ask where I was going.
When I left, she said, "Keep your head below the song." What song?
I asked. You'll hear it, she said.
You'll think you're the one making it.
You're not. That night, I slept in the lee of a church bus that had done
its duty until it couldn't. I dreamed that the red rain was a choir in a ventilator mask, and I was handing it earplugs that turned into seeds when they touched its palms. The union set a tax that wasn't money. At dawn I worked a crank that lifted a shutter that had rusted into doubt. I scraped a rail. I fixed a rope with a bowline and showed the kid from the family how to tie it, how to turn a loop into a promise that won't slip when it's scared. He smiled like language had returned from sleep. Rule 16. Teach one thing before you take one thing. A rope knot is worth 3 cans. Before I left, Cora gave me 2 things I didn't deserve. A map with circles around safe culverts and a tin whistle.
For the stitches, she said.
High note turns them rabid. Sometimes that's useful, but only if you're not the thing in the path. Don't use it unless you can make the note belong somewhere else. I kept the whistle.
I hoped I'd never need it.
I planned where I'd throw it if I did. The highway north was a ribbon again. A convoy passed me going south, 4 carts tied behind 2 bicycles, panniers bulged with fabric and jars that would taste like summer if the lids didn't betray them. We didn't nod.
Nods are noise in the wrong culture.
We all looked down to read the road instead, a polite making room. Around mile 126, the Atlas of Absences had written in the surveyor's tidy, fatal hand, "No dogs after dark." I wasn't sure if that was a joke or a line from a poem. I took it as if it were neither. I detoured into a town that had a post office with a mural I wanted to look at, because I liked to see where people thought they were going before the map unlearned itself. The mural showed a riverboat and a farmer and a woman with hair that was the colour of potential.
I looked because looking makes me feel like I'm still a person and not just a movement. I heard the song before I knew it was the song, not choral, not river.
A hum that came from nowhere and everywhere. The choir had a branch here. Their church was a warehouse with pews made of pallets. Inside they were singing a single note, like it would cash a check. Someone had set up a PA that ran off a generator that hiccuped like it was lying about its health. The hollowed ringed the parking lot like they'd been invited. The door was open. I don't want to describe the smell. Rule 17, if a place asks you to pick a side, check your exits before you decide you're brave. I moved, quiet, along the storefronts, through the smell of vinegar and gasoline,
Out the back.
into a field of soy that had decided to see what that name meant if it didn't have anyone to tell it. 2 town blocks over, the hum changed pitch. The generator coughed like a confession and died. The door stayed open. The note stopped. The hollowed did what they always do when their lullaby ends. They returned to their other god, hunger. I wanted to be a good person. I kept walking. Rule 18, the easiest way to die in a post-apocalypse is to be a hero on someone else's stage. At noon, I reached a rail spur. The rails were a path where nothing had driven for months. Good sight lines.
Bad cover.
I chose them because I wanted my feet to remember how to rhythm again. Tie, ballast, tie, ballast. The act of stepping became prayer. I found a mark on a post, a circle with a notch. The Lantern Union's shorthand for water. You can drink without crying first. I filled a bottle and added a tablet anyway, because the last thing I wanted to learn this month was the new voice of cholera. Rule 19. 2 is 1. 1 is none. Treat and boil or treat twice. Redundancy is religion. That night I slept under a trestle and listened to the metal talk itself through temperature. It sounded like a grandfather denying and then accepting the new weather. In the morning, I would leave the tracks. In the morning, the Gauntlet would stop being a corridor and start being a web. The Atlas of Absences had a note 3 pages ahead. Midland Station, prove you're quiet. I didn't know what that meant yet.
I like rules even when they make me mad.
I would go see what prove looked like when it wasn't a test and was instead a door. Midland Station looked like someone had placed a train museum in the prairie and told it to remember how to be a fortress. 2 cars welded into a gatehouse. A switch stand reconfigured as a bell that wasn't allowed to ring.
A wall of pallets that had been filled with dirt and rebar and cans and stubbornness.
The gate had a little square cut out of it for a voice. "Approach," the voice said through the square. I showed my hands.
I showed my lack of engine.
I hung the whistle on a piece of cord around my neck, so it would be there if it needed to be there and never otherwise. "What's your rule against dying?" the voice asked. "More socks than pride," I said, because I wanted to see if a joke could be a password. A pause. Then, "That's not bad."
Prove you're quiet. I didn't ask how. Asking is noise.
I took off my shoes.
I put them on my pack. I rolled my weight on the outside edge of my feet.
I crossed the last 20 yards of ballast without making the rocks clink.
It wasn't perfect.
But it was good enough to make whoever sat behind the square nod without seeing their face. The gate opened 1 person wide. Inside, a yard where people had remembered how to build a little civilization without brochures, a kitchen of rocket stoves made from bricks that had broken out of buildings, a clinic with a door that was a sheet on a curtain rod that someone had apologized to, a tool library where a sledgehammer hung like a teacher's pet, a person with a buzzed head and eyes like they could sand a board and talk ethics at the same time put out their hand. "Isla," they said. "Switchmaster. We swap languages here. Teach one, learn one. I can clean contacts," I said. "I can scrape a pane and make a light polite."
I can make rope be responsible, they smiled.
"Good. Eat first. Then show us." I worked the lantern line again. I took a feeling of ownership in a place where I did not intend to sleep 2 nights. I taught a kid to tie a prusik and watched their face turn into future.
Isla watched me the way a parent watches a date.
At the end of the day, they gave me a token cut from a rail spike, stamped with a tiny hammer. "Union will see this and pretend to know you," Isla said. "Don't wear it where the choir can see. They think the lanterns are stealing their songs. Are they?"
I asked. "We're teaching people new ones," they said.
That feels the same to a tyrant. Rule 20. If someone gives you a token, spend it only when you can't make change. I slept on a platform in a car that had been a dining car once and now held a row of cots that looked like exclamation points. My body wanted to keep going. The kid with the knot came by with a book of birds.
"This one is a killdeer," they said, pointing.
"It fakes a broken wing to get you away from its eggs." "Good lesson," I said. "I hope I never have to use it." "You will," they said, with the unearned certainty of youth. They are usually right. The lesson isn't a group you join. It's what the choir calls you when you leave and still want to talk.
Former acolytes.
They use children's voices on radios because they are broken and because it works.
"Please help," crackled at me when I left Midland. "Not from the relay."
From a handheld I had thought was dead in the bottom of my pack.
I threw it into a ditch and felt guilty and then picked it up because waste is a sin now. "Please help," the voice said again, exactly the same.
A recording, a loop. I took the battery out and put the radio back on my belt without power. Rule 21, if the plea has no breath, it's a performance. Help a body, not a broadcast. The next town had been farm supply before. The smell of seed and oil fought in the parking lot. A lesson kid sat on the hood of a pickup with a stick in their hands and drew circles on a patch of dirt like it was a face they wanted to remember. They looked at me without a flinch.
"You're going to the coast," they said. "Eventually," I said.
The trail goes through everybody's business first. They tapped the stick once on the truck's hood. "You'll need salt," they said. "You'll need rope. You'll need to stop believing you can get there as fast as your heart wants." I stopped believing that the minute my legs started telling me about themselves, I said. We looked at each other in a way that acknowledged the fact we had both decided to live. "Turn left at the blue silo," the kid said. "Not right. Right goes to a culvert that pretends to be helpful and isn't. They leave glass there. They, the choir, the lesson, the union, the words people make to put order on a broken system." I thought of Juniper's photo of a pier again and realized I had stopped seeing the sky in it when I thought of it and had started seeing the bolts. Rule 22. Your destination is not your job. Your job is the next safe step. I left the kid a handful of screws and a sleeve from a hose that would fit something when they needed it to. They looked at it and nodded like contracts had been signed. I turned left at the blue silo. It led to what the Atlas had called a span. Not a bridge, not a culvert, a place where a ditch had been taught to behave.
I saw the glints of glass at the other way.
I saw the bottle traps and the fishing line and the way the wind would have made a song out of the wrong choice. I crossed and left, bulbet on the underside lip, a lantern line of soot on a rail,
a switchmaster's stamp in my pocket,
a kid's rope in my hands like a prayer. That night, I slept beneath a scaffold of billboards that had boiled down the old world into 5 words at a time.
Now there were no words.
Just faces faded into ideas. I read the faces and wrote what I needed under them. Rule 23, when the world stops telling you what to do, don't get excited. Get careful. I dreamed of Juniper that night for the first time since the red rain. Not as a child.
As the person she might be now, a woman on a pier translating waves. "Avery," she said, using my name like an anchor, and I woke with my hand closed around the mitten in my pocket.
When I hear my name in dreams, I wake, moving. Rowan. It hits a switch in the hard part of my chest and makes my legs agree to keep being legs. Morning had put a thin film of frost on the ballast. My breath rose in a way that turned me into a semicolon in the cold. I warmed my hands under my shirt and reread the surveyor's ledger, Atlas of Absences, by the light that didn't brag. He had left a margin note in grease pencil near a town called Faircut. Cartographers meet Tuesdays, 3rd hour. Prove your memory. I like the idea of a map you have to speak to be part of. The meet point was a siding that hadn't seen traffic in months. 2 freight cars sat like animals who had decided to evolve into houses. A chalk mark on one wheel read, R. Someone had spent time making an arrow that pointed both ways.
I like their sense of humour.
I knocked twice on the frame, low, then once on the coupler. Habit has been mistaken for code enough times to survive. A woman with a scarf tied around her head like a prize leaned out of the car.
Doran looked at me the way you...
Look at a person who might know where your favourite mug went. She had pencils tucked behind both ears. A coil of string hung on her belt like a tail. "You're early," she said. "I'm hungry for a new way to look at roads," I said. She held up one hand and traced a shape in the air. 2 vertical lines and a bar under. "Titi, yours?"
she asked. "Mine," I said.
"Safe to pass, not to stay?" She smiled with half her face. "We call that ladder and belt," she said. "We'll add it to the table." Inside, the car had been domesticated by chalk and twine. A wall had a grid of marks that weren't alphabets but behaved like one. String tied to pushpins made starbursts on a piece of plywood with a hand-drawn river. 3 people sat in a circle, each with a different coloured pencil, each adding notes to a map that had no legend and didn't want one. "We layer," the scarf woman said. "Red is noise. Blue is water. Green is food. We never put all 3 on the same page. Somebody finds a page, they don't find a meal, and a murder weapon in the same minute." Rule 24. Build your maps in layers. Don't give a single piece of paper the power to end you. They tested me by telling me a route with no nouns. 2 lefts after the white fence with the boards missing, then over the singing gravel, then the alley that smells like eucalyptus. Stop where your shadow disappears. Then they made me say it back while they shuffled everything else I knew in my head. I've never liked school.
I liked this. I passed because I kept my hands still when I spoke.
They trusted fingers as much as mouths. "What do you want?" Scarf asked. "A line to the river that doesn't pretend to be easy," I said.
"A ferry, if your string has one," she pointed at the plywood.
"Stillwater Syndicate runs a rope ferry at Mays Bend," she said. "They'll take your weight if you don't bring your noise. They'll tax you with something useful, not a story." She slid me a small slip of paper with a mark on it in blue, a loop with a tail. "Show this. Don't say ferry, say crossing. Don't say Stillwater, say Mays people. Names last longer than we do. Don't go throwing them around just because you like the way they sound." They made me earn the slip by drawing a thing they didn't have yet. "Rail mile 212, I said.
"Underpass. Culvert clear. Blue cloth on the left fence post.
"Water tastes like leaf."
Boyle anyway. Scarf, later I learned her name was Den, wrote it down and added a tiny dot in the upper right of her page.
"That dot means Rowan told us this," she said. "If you lied, we'll erase it and you with it." "I won't lie,"
I said. Nobody intends to, she answered. They traded me a length of waxed string and 2 nails for a tiny radio battery that I had burned my thumb figuring out which end was still living.
They turned it in their hands like a toy that might bite. Radio is the third rail, Den said. We touch it when we have to. We map the stations we can trust. You find a new one that isn't bait, you tell us in person, not with air. Before I left, I drew kites low by their door. Den added another mark beside it, hers, an open circle with a tiny question mark in the center. Eyes, she said, means we're looking. If you see this beside your mark, we're near. You can come inside without proving you're quiet first. Rule 25. Share a language with 3 people and it becomes a place. I left the car feeling like I had eaten a good sentence. The string on my belt knocked my thigh with each step like a metronome. A map that you could carry in your muscles felt like prayer. May's Bend smelled like wet rope and someone cooking beans somewhere upwind with onion they didn't deserve. The river had widened into a shoulder that knew how to push. The ferry wasn't a ferry. It was a platform built out of heavy planks pulled on a rope strung to the far bank. Guided by a pole and stubbornness, 2 people ran it, a man with a beard that had learned to be practical, and a woman with a shaved head and laughter lines that said she had not let the world take all of her. The beard pointed at the mark Den had drawn on my slip. He nodded. Crossing, he said. We can. No engines, I said back, because I like to let people know I've read their rules before they have to tell me. No shouting, the woman said. We'll tell you when to step and where to breathe. Take your pack off your shoulders, but keep the strap in your hand. Water is a stealer.
Don't let it steal everything in one grab. She nodded at my belt and at the waxed string.
Good, she said. Tie your radio. Rule 26. On water, weight is a decision. If you have to choose what sinks, choose fast. We loaded 3 travelers and a bicycle whose bearings needed a prayer. The platform shifted. The river expressed an opinion. The rope hummed its rumor into the air. The oars had been wrapped with rags and tape where wood could have squeaked. The pole wore a sleeve where it kissed the gunwale. Halfway out, the river made a new choice. Something heavy bumped from under, the relic of someone else's bad day, and the platform jerked. The bearded man's foot slipped. He caught himself with a noise that would have cracked teeth if it had had a shape. Water climbed over the lip and changed the ferry's math. The woman, May, I guessed, put her hand flat on the planks and said, "Breathe." We did. She kept us in the shallow part of panic where we are still teachable. We lean, she said. Not all at once. Left first, now right.
You! She pointed at me. Wax your hand. I didn't understand until she glanced at the seam where plank met plank and water insisted on inserting itself.
I dug in my pack for a stub of candle, warmed it in my palm, and pressed it into the seam with a rag. The wax behaved like it wanted to be a good citizen if I made it feel needed. The seep slowed. The platform remembered it floated. Good, May said.
Tax. I handed her the candle stub and a 15-foot length of paracord.
She raised an eyebrow at the abundance. You can have half, I said. I'll regret it later. That's how I know it's a fair trade. She cut it with a smile. When we reached the far bank, she linked 2 fingers with mine for the time it takes to make a promise to yourself. If you come back with a child, she said, we'll put you first in the queue. If you come back with a man who thinks a loud voice is how you take space, we'll put you last. Fair, I said.
I meant it.
I left Ytend at knee height on the rock near where the rope tied off, small because the river deserves humility. The bend opened into a run of warehouses that had turned into caves. In the second, I heard a sound that wasn't sound, the hush of 5 people trying to remember how to be quiet.
I didn't go in. That's the rule and it's my nature.
But I left 3 screws and a strip of tape on a pallet where careful hands would find them. I hoped they read that in the right language. By afternoon, the river had guessed where I wanted to be and gave me a cut bank to follow, a path worn by deer, then by people who had learned from deer. The atlas had a block letter, martingale, avoid. I know what a martingale is. It's a strap that keeps a horse's head from flying up too far. I considered the metaphor. Rule 27, if the map says avoid, don't try to be an exception. Try to be alive. Martingale Envoy Plaza had 4 pumps on each side and a convenience store shaped like every other one, which is to say, a rectangle that pretended to be a house. The doors had been propped open by 2 bottles taped to the handles. The glass inside had been distributed on the floor with precision. Over the door, a wind chime made of fork handles turned movement into confession. The parking lot looked empty. That was the problem. Too empty is a kind of noise. I took off my shoes. I wrapped my feet in socks and tape.
I stepped where the paint stripes were because paint holds glass less fiercely than naked concrete.
Inside, rugs had been laid over the worst patches in a way that read generous and was not. Under one rug, nails waiting in a shy hedgehog. Under another, a ring of bolts that would announce your last step to anything with ears. The freezers were fogged, silent. The soda machine had been killed with a knife that still lived in it. Someone had made a point. At the back, a door marked Employees Only knew what only meant. I put my hand against it and felt the vibration of breath. I didn't open it. Rule 28. Don't rescue the hand that reaches from behind a door if the door has 3 locks on your side. A man came in.
Loud in the way a man is when he thinks loud has saved him before.
He wore a backpack that jangled. He leaned on the counter like it owed him a drink. He lifted a metal rack of potato chips and dropped it because it stuck to his glove. The rack sang. The fork chimes answered. The glass whispered. The parking lot replied with a sound that had legs. He looked at me like noise had waiters. "You going to help?" he asked. "No," I said. He blinked, then laughed, because he had only ever practiced one script with other men and it wasn't working.
"I've got a gun," he said. "Then die loud," I said, and threw my whistle through the produce aisle into the back, high and hard.
It hit a shelf. The pitch it made was wrong for any animal but us. The things outside skittered for where it had landed, having no idea what music was for anything but moving. The man ran, and ran right into the rug hedgehog. He fell. His pack screamed fork handles and keys.
I did not go to him.
I put one more strip of tape on a wind chime and stepped out the side door that the employees had always
used. When they needed to smoke a little quieter, I waited in a ditch under a
billboard until the noise became someone else's lesson. The man's gun fired once. The sound turned the parking lot into a radio tower. The Hollowed arrived. I can't tell you what happened next without telling you the thing I promised myself not to tell, that guilt is a product I can't afford to make in bulk. Rule 29. If you can't change the outcome, change the distance.
That's not cruelty.
That's math. When the noise was done, I returned to the aisle and took a bag of salt, a coil of cheap twine, and 4 packets of chemical hand warmers that would save a morning someday. I left 3 letters on the floor with chalk. Pattig and a small circle with a slash through it, the cartographer's sign for no linger. Outside, the wind picked up and snow did what snow always does, turned tracks into suggestions. I promised the air I'd do a better thing the next time I had a chance to trade my certainty for someone else's. Chapter 10. When the choir came back. Singing, I got back to Midland on a sky the colour of an old bruise. The air smelled like iron and kettles. Isla met me at the gate and offered a cup with steam in it. "We're best at soup," they said. "We practice a lot." "Practice pays," I said, and handed them a railspike token Den had stamped with her question mark. "For your table?" They turned it in their fingers like it was new money. "The choir's been asking where we put our hymnal," Ayla said without ceremony. "I think we ripped out the pages and handed them to the union." "What did you tell them?" I asked. That we sing with our hands, Isla said. They don't understand the chorus. That night the choir came.
Not the suit.
Another one. This one wore denim and God, the way a firefighter wears a coat, heavy, hot, and with a sense he was owed the right to sweat on your floor. Behind him, 10 with him, 5 who meant it, 5 who were trying to prove they did. They brought drums made of buckets and sticks, and the idea that if your throat hurt afterward, it had been worth it. They set up on the approach, 20 yards from the pallet wall. They banged their buckets. They prayed in rhythmic vocabulary. They sang a single note like they had taught it to be domesticated. The hollowed came up the slope like an unannounced congregation.
Isla didn't flinch.
Saeed checked a valve like it was a prayer book. We don't ring, Ayla said. We knock. They lifted the angle iron triangle and touched it with the
rebar rod twice, are all in, then once, are.
Hold. The yard moved like a single creature that knew where its ribs were. We did what the Union had taught us. We lit a cold burn line at the edge of the switchyard, catching fumes, not fire, just enough to make a smell the hollowed found rude. We hung a sheet soaked in vinegar across the breach where the wall wasn't finished yet. We set 3 sound sources 100 yards out, rattles made of bolts in cans,
a hung piece of sheet metal we could kick with a rope,
a bag of glass on a pulley. Rule 30, when you must be loud, pre-select where the noise lives. The choir banged harder, like louder could make right. Isla whispered to the yard, patience. And we did nothing that the first 5 minutes had not already taught us to do. The hollowed hit the vinegar curtain and changed their minds about our yard and went for the sound we had placed on a rope in the trees. We tugged the rope when their hunger faltered, and we made a new destination for them, and then another. If I could teach this in a classroom, I would teach it as a math problem, and we would all leave believing in algebra again. The denim man shouted something about cowards. He lifted his drum, a 5-gallon bucket that had seen paint and then seen the inside of a barn. He threw it at the wall. It clanged. It clanged again because physics is a faithful congregant. The hollowed noticed. They turned, which is what he wanted, until it wasn't. He fell back into his own men and found out they had not practiced being a net. Isla looked at me and touched their throat, the way a singer asks for the key. I lifted the Union's whistle and felt my soul argue. And then I threw it, not to my left, not to my right, but high and far, so the pitch would be above the wall and not inside it. It hit an empty container that made a tenor ring. The stitchers in the pack, the fast ones who hate tin, peeled away like magnets correctly handled. After, the denim man ran.
His bucket band ran. Isla didn't open the gate.
We don't make saves for the audience, they said, soft.
As if apologizing to something I couldn't see. When it was done, the air tired.
The yard humming with the low animal sounds of tools being put away. We took stock. We had lost the corner of a platform to someone dropping a lamp where it shouldn't be. We had scorch marks that made the pallets look like art. We had no bodies to count inside the wall. That last thing was not chance. It was repetition. The kid I'd taught the Prusik stood under the dining car door and looked like a person who had used up a day learning too much. I handed them my candy, the last one I had saved for a winter afternoon when I needed to talk my fear into being sugar. They ate it like a ritual. We sat with the quiet until it wasn't foreign again. We improved the wall where it had sagged under insults. We praised bolts. We stored vinegar. We rewound rope. Rule 31, congratulations is a poor substitute for maintenance. Fix your fence, then accept your thanks. Chapter 11. The price of quiet. In the morning, the world looked like it always did after you survived a night. Smaller, more personal. The caravan from the west came with 5 carts full of jars no longer rattling, 3 bicycle tires that didn't squeal, someone had found oil or made it, and faces that relaxed when they saw our wall wasn't a song yet. We paid the price we'd been avoiding. We burned the last of a barrel of lamp oil to put a real skin on the seams in the pallet wall. We'd been hoarding it for winter. Winter didn't get a vote, the choir didn't return. But their echo did, a lesson with a radio telling children's voices to ask for the wrong help in the wrong places. We walked the perimeter and hung the cartographer's no-linger sign where the wall met the public path. Isla added our own, a handprint with the thumb tucked, our shorthand for don't trust the grin. Den came the following afternoon on a flat car, pulled by two quiet men and a woman who had the shoulders of a person who'd taught other people to lift for a living. She looked at the scorch and nodded. "You owe us nothing for the whistle," she said.
"You used it right." She handed me a new one without ceremony, and a mark to carve into it if it ever left my hand the same way. Saeed pulled me aside while we rewrapped.
A valve in insulation that had started to think about spring. "You going or staying?" he asked. "What's my usefulness if I stay?"
I asked back. "You'd be another pair of hands that knows how not to drop the wrong thing," he said.
And that's something. But the river to the coast is white with mistakes. If you're the sort of person who remembers rules out loud, the coast needs you more. "I have a sister," I said. Because I had kept it in my mouth long enough, Saeed's eyes softened. "Not sorry, just certain. And the line is already drawn," he said. "Take our knocks with you." We stood by the triangle and learned a new code, rope knocks. 2 short pulls, safe.
1 long danger.
1 short, 1 long trade. We tied those into our arms the way you do when rope becomes language. Isla gave me a second token, this one stamped with a small hammer and a dot. "You're union adjacent now," they said. "You can call us at lamp houses without knocking your knuckles raw first."
Don't abuse it.
Don't think you won't want to. Rule 32, leave with lessons, not souvenirs. You're going to need the former. The latter will get heavy. We had a service for the ones we hadn't lost but could have. It felt like cheating. We lit 1 candle for the idea of it and blew it out because we decided to keep fire our language, not louds. The kid with the rope tied a series of knots and unwound them without looking.
It was their prayer.
It became mine, Chapter 12, the long way. Invitation convoys have rules. Good ones do anyway. Den's cartographers rolled in with a group bound north toward the lake, a long grey animal that slept under glass light some nights and under cloud the others. Their lead, an old paramedic named Hollis, spoke with his hands in a way that made me trust his mouth too. "Spacing," he said, holding up 2 fingers, then 3. 2 bike lengths in town, 3 outside. We move at the pace of the slowest without making them feel slow. We don't divvy loudly. We don't stop where the road gives us too many lanes to imagine. We stop where it narrows. We don't use names. We use jacket colors and the fact that we can count. Rule 33. In a convoy, leave room for mistakes that aren't yours. The long way north avoided the interstate whenever the interstate wanted to show off. It hugged cornrows and dips, went behind the school where the playground had been denuded of swings, cut across gravel lanes where the only witness was a silo that had decided to be a moon when the real one was late. Hollis assigned me midline because I looked like a person who would run but wouldn't abandon.
I didn't correct him.
Den's people tied string to mirrors to signal turns without voices. We learned to look for the string that fluttered like a fish. We learned to wave our hands low when we wanted to point high. We learned to hum under our breath when the wind needed a tune. Under a sky that had graduated from grey to silver, the glass lighthouse appeared. Not the sea kind, the inland kind. A restored relic by a lake had become a point on more maps than the cartographers wanted to admit. It had a union plate on its door, blink discipline, 3 short, 3 long, 1 short if all clear, 2 long, 1 short if under attention. No light if trouble had name and address. Den leaned her shoulder against the glass and sighed.
"It's pretty even when it's dangerous," she said. "Most pretty things are," I said. Hollis looked at me as if measuring my breath.
"You still headed for the coast?" he asked. "I'll go where the absences line up," I said, "and wherever the water doesn't lie." "Then you're with us," he said. "As far as we all agree to be together."
Nobody's anybody's hero.
Nobody becomes a problem on purpose. We slept that night in a tangle of bodies that respected corners. The lake talked quietly to itself. The lighthouse blinked its code. A small beauty learned from a bigger one. I thought of Juniper on a pier with a sky that had been practicing being kind. I pressed the mitten in my pocket flat with my palm, like I was ironing a picture I wanted to keep not just for me. Rule 34. When you inherit a light, you inherit the rules that go with it. Don't use one without the other. In the morning, Frost sketched the outline of the convoy on the grass. We moved before the sun could think it had opinions. Den came up beside me and looped a string around my wrist and around hers, twice, then slipped it off and made me keep the small circle. "You ever get lost?" she said. "You follow the places where string can go. We'll be in one of them." Saeed had told me to talk to water. Den had told me to follow string. Hollis had told me to leave space. Isla had told me to knock.
Cora had told me to smell the burn.
The ferry had taught me to decide what to drop before I needed to drop it. Juniper's picture was in my chest. The Red Rain's first day was in my throat. The choir was in the rear view of a world that no longer had cars. Ahead, the long way, which is the only way I trust. The atlas had a page that I hadn't opened yet. In the margin, in the surveyor's tidy hand, a note, anchor, south by east.
A line, not a dot.
A home, if that word still means what it used to. We'll see. The glass lighthouse didn't belong to the lake any more than a memory belongs to the room it returns to. It belonged to whoever remembered how to make its light small. We arrived at last light, convoys strung out along the access road in a line that could have been mistaken for a thought if you didn't know better. The lake breathed cold. The sky was the pale of a coin worn smooth. Den led with her string. Hollis counted under his breath, the way medics do when they keep time for a pulse that needs convincing. The Union plate on the door had been carved by hands, not stamped by a factory, a lantern with a shutter drawn mostly closed, 3 short, 3 long, 1 short scratched beneath. A second scratch added later, 2 long, 1 short, caution. It felt recent. The keeper met us at the lower door, a tall woman with a knit cap pulled low and a presence that made the stairwell feel like it had corners again. She had keeper's posture. "I've learned it since, a kind of economy where every movement has precedent." "I'm Imani," she said. "No rank, no badge, just the name and the work that carried it. Shutters are stiff on the north. We burn narrow, we burn steady, we cut at the hour."
No engines after dark.
No singing. Den showed her the hammer token from Midland and the cartographer's eyes with the question mark. I showed her a Union token Isla had stamped with a dot. Imani nodded once. The way you nod at a stranger you've decided to let teach you something. We moved through the lighthouse as if it could unlearn all our good habits if we bumped into the furniture. The stairs wound around the brick like a promise. The lens sat at the top under glass, scarred with soot and rain. It had the delicate arrogance of an antique that still knew how to be necessary. Imani handed me a scraper and a rag, and we worked the panes until our arms learned the weight of grace. Den relashed the shutter's pull line with a bowline. It held like a lesson. Hollis checked the lantern's wick and murmured the kind of encouragement you give a stubborn flame in a hard season. Rule 35. Lamps aren't courage. They're tools. Burn narrow, shut fast. Don't mistake light for permission. We practiced the blink. 1, 2, 1, wait. Repeat if and only if the lake kept its manners. We hooded the flame until it was a suggestion. Imani watched the horizon with her eyes and the glass with her hands, and us with whatever else she'd taught to pay attention. Why glass everywhere? I asked, stupid with the question even as it left my mouth. She tilted her head. Because people come to light even when you tell them not to, she said. If they see the room in the light, they think safety lives here. If they only see the code, they think safety lives in them. We prefer the second. I felt the words seat themselves in me like a chair I hadn't realized I needed. Down below, convoys that weren't ours moved along the road with their own languages.
A single knock on someone's cartwheel, turn, a hiss down.
We stayed still and made the lighthouse look less interesting than the sky that had always meant better things than weather. At midnight, something tested our code. A response, one short, one long, two short. Not ours, improvised or stolen. Imani did not answer. She quoted Union Rule instead, as if reciting a recipe. Repeat your message with your hands before you ask for our mouth, she said quietly, almost smiling. I kept the shutter where it was. Rule 36. Trade the story last. Make people show you their hands before you give them a light. Near dawn, we cut the flame and the lens sighed. Glass remembers heat the way we remember kindness. It holds it longer than it should. We left the lighthouse as if we didn't want it to think it had been moved. Imani walked us to the lower door.
Don't let pretty change your rules, she said, looking at the lake.
It tries hardest when you're tired. I'll try to be ugly at dawn, I said. She laughed with the little snort of a person too tired to be polite on purpose. I put my mark low under the stairwell rail, in case someone like me came later and needed a small permission. Den added her eye with question beside it. We're looking. We walked back to our sleeping shapes with our mouths quiet and our feet happy to be feet. Chapter 14. Codes. Knocks and narrow light. The day after the shift, the lighthouse keeper taught us the rest of the code with a piece of chalk and a concrete floor. She drew lines that were not letters, and then said the words as if they were: burn narrow, blink slow, cut at the hour, never twice for greed.
Only twice for danger. Hollis stretched by the door where the cold pooled.
We'll take the outer route, he said. 2 days along the eastern ridges, then down to Clear Point. Folks say there's a pier there with salt that learned to be patient. We pay in work. Clear Point's where the map makes people forget their legs no better, Den muttered. Everybody thinks a pier is a shortcut. Sometimes it is, I said. Sometimes it's a stage, she replied. Rule the 37, trust is given in ounces, betrayed in pounds. Weigh every new person by what they carry, without asking. We filed north and east, our line following a contour our feet were willing to argue for. The lake at our left became a presence instead of a destination. Along a gravel cut, we passed a tree with a blue cloth tied to a low branch, a well, Wren's mark from a long time ago, and a different set of rules. I drank, treated anyway, thanked with a breath. Midday, the wind turned bachelor cold, the kind that doesn't promise to bring a family later. The sky splayed out into hammered tin. We put our hoods up. We spread our line just enough that one person falling wouldn't make it a fashion. Near dusk, we found Clear Point. The town held a pier that had remembered to face west, and a row of buildings that knew how to huddle together when the weather turned into a bully. The pier had bodies on it, moving in ways that read as work from this distance, and could have read other ways closer. Hollis raised a hand and we stopped. We counted windows and chairs and the number of people who turned when we stopped. We listened for engines. We heard none. We heard the small song of wood against metal, the pier speaking. We heard a voice that had been taught to say welcome like a product. 2 at the head, 3 by the net, Den said with her eyes. 1 watching the water. Stillwater Syndicate has kin out here, a woman near the front of the convoy whispered. Maybe May's people. May would stand with her hands empty, I said. People who are honest make room for them. We approached with our hands apart from our bodies, referring to them without offering. The man at the head of the pier lifted his chin. He had the beard that men grow when they want to look like headstones. He wore a brown coat that had started life as an advertisement for a hardware store and had been promoted to uniform. "Welcome to Clearpoint," he said. His teeth did not lie. His eyes were doing something else. "We've got work," Hollis said. "We've got hands. We trade with tools and rules. We don't do engines at night." "Good," the man said. "Engines take air. We have little to spare." He gestured to the pier. "We have salt," he added, and behind him I heard it, the small scrape of a barrel lid and the hush, reverence people speak over something they think will outlast them. We tied our bikes 2 deep and our carts 3. We left someone with the carts, 2 someones, never one. Den stayed with them. I went with Hollis and 6 others. We walked onto the pier that had the colour of old teeth. Chapter 15. The Pier. With a debt, the pier had been patched with pallets and bolts that didn't match and had been tightened by somebody who loved bolts. Nets hung from pegs like a language I couldn't read. A small clam rake leaned against the rail like a dog. A boy coiled rope in a way that made Imani's lectures ring in my ears. He had learned to wind. He had not yet learned to believe the wind needed him back. The man in the brown coat, Fenton, I learned, showed us to a shed near the end of the pier. He opened the door to the smell of old salt and new mildew. "Tax," he said. "The water keeps us. The salt keeps us. We ask 10% in work or 90% in risk. Your choice?" "Define risk," Hollis said, and the corner of Fenton's mouth twitched because he'd expected us to pick, not define. "We drag the sounder ship along the east shoal," he said.
"Not far."
"The ice makes tricks. The sounder knocks, we read it. We have a hole that is not a hole, and we don't like surprises. Your hands keep the rope primed. Your eyes keep watch. We don't take ships at night," Hollis said. "Then work," Fenton said. "We need pallets lifted. We need nets mended. We need the salt shed braced because the brine thinks it can be a bully." We chose work. The betrayal came, like it always does, with familiarity. A man from the second wagon, thin, chewed fingernails, a laugh like he charged interest on it, drifted toward the head of the pier and had a conversation with sea that didn't wear water. He leaned too close to Fenton when he talked. He touched his sleeve.
He didn't know how to stand still.
I watched him because it's my habit and my rule, and I noticed the rope knot he had tied to the hitch that morning had been sloppy. Sloppy knotters make sloppy conspirators. Rule 38. In a whiteout, you hold the rope. In a crowd, you watch the knots. Either way, sloppiness is a leak. By afternoon, our carts had been moved 3 feet.
No one had said they'd done it.
Den's string had been retied in a bow instead of a half hitch. The boy with the coil had learned to watch hands that shouldn't know how to touch your stuff. "Your friend," Den said, "when I came back to check the carts." "Not mine," I said. "He told Fenton you had a radio that could talk farther than the tower," she said. "He's not wrong. He's also not right." We found him near the salt shed, trying to get a look at the lashings on our tarps without bending his back to the work.
He had a new knife on his belt.
It had not been there this morning. Fenton's coat had a stain at the shoulder that had not been there either. When the wind shifted, I smelled engine.
Not from the pier.
From the river cut. A low growl, muffled, masked with a tarp, but present. Den saw my face do what my face does when my guts file a report my mouth hasn't read yet. "Stillwater?" she asked. "Or cousins?" I answered. We did not shout. We played the moves. Hollis locked his eyes on the man with the new knife. He drew lines with his voice without using nouns. "Step back from the carts," he said. "Step toward the salt shed. We'll talk where work is." The man nodded and stepped the wrong way. He went toward the head of the pier. Fenton's head tilted. Too much.
His signal a child would notice.
The boy with the coil noticed. He tightened the rope in his hand until his knuckles went memory white. "Not here." Hollis said, almost gentle. He looked at me like I was a lever he could only pull once. Rule 39. Stop is a plan. Not moving is a plan. Freeze is not a failure if you turn it into a choice. I stepped between the man and Fenton, not close, enough that he had to choose a direction. He chose left toward a barrel where the brine sat. He bumped the rim. The lid did not move. Den's hands turned into knots on their own. She tied the barrel down without looking, as if she were closing the lid on a story. The man smiled a small smile that said he'd become the wrong kind of silhouette and now had to learn how to be a better shape. Hollis said what he had to say. We give you our hands. We don't give you our insides. If you want salt, we'll move it. If you want a radio, you can use it while I hold it.
If you want us to be an easy sliver to pry up and pick over, you can leave now and tell the lake you learned what it sounds like when a no stays a no. The man laughed a little again, and it sounded smaller.
Fenton's eyes did math. The engine sound in the cut shifted. Somebody put a hand on a kill switch. Quiet. The pier remembered how to be a pier, not a plan. When it was done, we moved the carts back 3 feet. We retied the knot with a half hitch. We worked, we lifted pallets. We mended nets with square knots. We didn't sleep inside their shed. We slept on the pebbled sand with a tarp over our heads like a decision to listen. The man with the new knife did not leave. He also didn't draw his edge. I decided not to learn his name. Rule 40. Surrender gear, not people.
If you must give something, give rope.
If you must keep something, keep each other. Chapter 16, The Betrayal and the Window. Betrayal, when it comes, always has a window. We saw ours because Den had taught us to measure angles like accountants measure debts. Morning put a glass over the lake. We ate quietly, the way people do when they're saving their words for worse weather. Fenton offered us a second shift on the pier, and Hollis declined the way medics decline dessert when they have to run quick later. We began to move, slow, to suggest nothing. The man with the new knife drifted to the rear again. He saw Den checking our lashings and he couldn't keep from saying something.
Tight, he said, admiringly falsely. Not tight enough to keep you out, Den replied. He swallowed.
Something in his face decided to fight himself. You can see it. It's the micro-flinch that lives behind a person's eyes when they have to decide between shame and a worse thing. He broke for the cut. 2 figures rose out of the grass. Behind the first breakwater, men with long oars and short patience. The engine started as if it belonged to them. It did. They moved toward our carts in a line that made the geometry of greed. At the same time, a second motion from the pier's far end, the sounder ship pushing off without a knock. Fenton turned as if to stop it and did not. Someone elsewhere had dictated today's plan. We didn't shout. We did the thing rope crews do when a line tangles. We stepped on the line in the right place and pulled once, not 12 times. Hollis pulled the whistle Den had given me from a pocket at his belt and tossed it into the river, not to the right, not to the left, but high. It hit sheet metal on an old boat wreck. The sound that came out had a pitch that made the stitchers in the brush to the north lift their heads like deer who had learned a new prayer. They turned to where the sound was. They began to move. The men with the oars paused, looked too long, and then did the wrong thing. They ran toward the whistle, away from us. Away is away. It is also toward. Den pulled a tarp over the closest cart, a motion that made the cart look like nothing except what it was, a shape the wind needed to be informed about, not the human eye. I took a step toward Fenton and the pier and then stopped, because stopping is a plan, and because the boy with the coil looked
like he was about to make a mistake that would make him a
man without getting to be a person first. Stay, I said.
Not to a dog and not like a command. He stayed.
He pressed his hand against the coil until he remembered a rope is a sentence, and the words are not his to say yet. The men with the oars reached the wreck. The whistle died in the water. The stitchers didn't. They arrived and discovered the difference between bait and dinner. We moved, calm, toward the shore that would not drown us if it had the option. Hollis put his hand on the arm of the man with the new knife, and he jerked, not away, toward.
He lunged at the cart.
He wanted something inside it that had become more than an object to him. He likely didn't know what anymore. "Don't," Hollis said.
"Don't make us waste you." The man stopped.
Something softened in his face. He let the knife drop. He watched it hit the grey stones. He didn't reach for it.
Not because of fear, because of something else.
He turned and walked away down the shore toward a place he had not earned. He became a small figure. Fenton shouted something about misunderstandings.
We didn't answer.
We left salt on the pier, our tax paid. Den tied our harness lines in place, checked the half-hitches twice. We put 2 cart lengths between each wagon. We looked like we were retreating. We were not. We were redrawing a line. Rule 41, when someone shows you their hunger, listen. Then leave them to feed it where they can't chew on you. We put 6 hours between us and the pier. We moved until the wind made a white line on the lake and the sky let go a little of its grudge. We stopped under a scrub stand. We ate bread that tasted like the effort of a morning. We didn't say the word betrayal out loud because our circle had learned not to say words that gave events a larger room to stay in. Den drew the map in dust with string. "We can cut straight east," she said, pointing. "The road's an invitation we don't need. We can ride the dune belly until the river turns into cold. Or we can gamble and take the light path across the lake while it pretends to be floor." "Whiteout will come early," Hollis said. "If the wind turns like this, you can feel it in your sinuses like someone is washing the inside of your head with a rag." I thought of Juniper's picture, and the pier, and the man with the new knife, and the way he had looked in that last second, when a story about him had given up. I thought about how close we had been to being the worst version of ourselves. I thought about the time and how much we had left and how much our legs owed to our lungs. "Lake?" I said. "Lake," Den agreed, reluctantly. "But we do it like we learned it from people who had no choice. We tie in." Chapter 17. Whiteout Rules. We spent the afternoon making a rope language the wind would have to learn before it could be a problem. Hollis measured spacing with his hands, 5 paces from the sled to the next puller, 3 between bodies when the rope travelled, 2 between voices, a formula that reads like a chant when you're cold. Rule 42. In whiteout, rope is a sentence.
1 hand on the line, 1 on yourself.
Don't let go of either. We cut branches into pickets and buried them in snow in a way that made them into anchors without making drama. Den tied the main line around each one, so if someone vanished into cloud, they'd vanish into a system, not a panic. We cut slits into cloth and made poor men's goggles. We made lazy Z's like old Inuit drift for eyes to see through, without getting the snow-blind religion. We smeared ash under our eyes with a finger. We made ourselves look like lessons. Rule 43. Don't stare at white.
Narrow your world on purpose.
Your eyes are easier to fool than your feet. Wind tried to invent geography. We told it no. We moved on a compass line that looked like insistence and felt like faith. Den called numbers every 30 steps. Hollis answered with the sum. We were a story we could check for errors as we lived it. The ice sang as we crossed, first low, then higher, then a pitch that made the hair on my arms decide to have opinions.
Singing ice is a liar and a teacher.
It tells you it's strong because it has a voice. It tells you it's about to break because it wants to see you dance. I listened for the sharp cracks.
I didn't hear them. I listened for the low thunder. I didn't hear that either.
I listened for the small sound of water exploring seams. I kept hearing it because water's curiosity is a constant. Rule 44. Read ice like music. Blue clear holds more truth than white rotten. 4 inches holds a person. 5 a sled. 6 a mistake you survive if rope knows your name. Hollis kept us slow. The lie of the lake is that it looks like a shortcut. It is not. It is a different path with fewer houses. We tied a rag to the lead line every 20 yards. We cut notches with a screwdriver into the ice and tied a little string around them as flags our hands could read. We made our own braille. Snow came horizontal. Whiteout proper, the kind that erases your feet and gives them back as if to remind you it has power. We kept moving like old ships, steady, not proud. Den hummed under her breath. I recognized the lighthouse code in it. 121, 121, like a tired heartbeat. Rule 45. Choose steady over fast. Speed is loud. Steady is polite. Polite gets you invited to tomorrow. Night and white are enemies of a different kind. We set the tent, a joke in a wind that didn't have a sense of humor. We dug down and made a trench and slept in the trench like soldiers who had chosen their battle ahead of time. The sleds turned into windbreaks. The stove turned into a friend we apologized to for not feeding enough. We warmed water with a whisper of flame and ate soup we did not deserve yet. We put our feet against one another like proof. We slept because the world would not make room for us if we didn't show the world we knew how to ask. Chapter 18. The decision. The lake and the line north in the morning. The lake had become a room the wind had rearranged without consulting us. Our flags were half-buried ghosts. Our rope had become insulted by small ridges of snow that thought they were mountains until a hand reminded them of their place. We moved anyway. The compass turned into a priest. Den tapped it with a glove when nobody watched her, as if to ask it to keep believing in being correct. The lake complained in other pitches.
I listened.
I found myself naming each tone as if they were birds. This is the crane sound.
It's fine.
This is the nightjar. It's a trick. This is the pane crack. Stop. We stopped when we heard the pane crack. We didn't argue with it. We moved left, not right. Den re-rigged the picket. Hollis let the sled draw half a circle, then straightened again. He looked like a person who had been a boy who preferred rope over math, and then grew up and learned rope was math. The wind changed its mind. It veered south, which meant the whiteout apologized and decided to draft. The light took on the color of a dirty pearl. We could see 20 yards again, then 50. The far shore might as well have been the moon. We had chosen to be in the center of an idea. We had chosen to make distance feel like a job again, instead of a thing that happened to us. We were 3 hours from the north shore when we met the pressure ridge. It wasn't dramatic. It was a grey line crossing east-west, a fault where the lake had decided 2 plates it had invented should meet and disagree. The line made a small sigh, persistent. You could smell water, wet metal, and something sweet like plant under ice trying to remember sun. Rule 46. Pressure ridges are doorways. Approach sideways. Cross at the smallest complaint. Belt off, rope on, pride nowhere. We went sideways. Den took the lead, because Den always takes the lead when rope needs a body. She pressed with the pole she had cut that morning from a sapling that had done nothing to offend any of us. The pole answered with vibration. She listened. She lay down on the ice, spread her weight, ran the line through her hand like it was a prayer bead. She pressed again. She moved like a thief who had decided to be honest. We crossed. Not all at once.
Nobody does anything all at once who wants to stay alive.
Sleds made their stubborn noises.
Ice made its musical threats.
The lake let us be, most likely because it had new tricks to play elsewhere. We stood up and smiled with our teeth, a private thing.
A recognition that sometimes the math and the muscle still carry. Then we saw them, 3 figures on the north shore.
Just within the place where shore becomes lake, moving slow, bundled, rope between them. 2 tall, 1 small. Their line was slack in the wrong places. Their spacing was the kind you get when you learn rules from someone who didn't believe in repetition. They lifted their hands, but very slowly. Not a call for help, a call for the possibility that we were not the kind of story that eats people who put their hands up. Hollis peered under the rim of his hood. "Sister and brother with a child," he said, half to himself. "Rope too low on their belts."
Always too low when nobody teaches you where to put your anchors. We moved toward them with the slowness that convinces ice to forget you have weight.
The small one lost their footing at the seam where shore pretends to be nice and lake pretends to be ground. The child went in up to the knee, then to the waist. The rope went taut wrong. The tall figures panicked politely. The ice turned into the wrong kind of instrument. We stopped 10 yards away. Stop is a plan. Hollis nodded to Den. She uncoiled the throw line with her wrists, not her elbows. She made a circle on the ice, smooth and promised to. She threw. It fell short because the wind had opinions. She hauled it back without hurry and threw again. It landed at the tall one's hip. He didn't see it because fear closes eyes to everything but itself. The small one reached and caught it with the clean promise that children sometimes bring to the rest of us. They tied it wrong. The knot started to tell a new story we didn't want. "Bowline!" Den shouted. "Last resort, last decibel." The tall woman's hands remembered something kinder than fear. She made a loop, and the rabbit went out and around the tree and back in, and I swore I could see the rabbit in the curl of rope. The knot set. The rope held. We pulled slow while the lake tried to remember what time did when it froze. The child came up. So did the adults. They lay on their backs the way you are supposed to because someone had once told them that even if they couldn't remember who and when, we brought them onto the shore by inches. We stripped the wet layers with hands that were kind first and careful second. We smeared their skin with friction. We poured warm water in tiny sips into their stubborn mouths. We let the shivers come and spoke the words Dr. Ortega had written, but that belonged to anyone now. Your body is making heat.
Let it. That's a miracle. The tall woman blinked like someone who had decided to be a person again.
She touched my sleeve and put a word in my chest that had been waiting. "Anchor," she said. It was a statement and a place. "South and east," she added, and we all nodded like that settled a thing that would refuse settling many times before we arrived. I looked at the lake for the long time it takes to decide to be brave again. We were 3 hours from the shore we had saved. We were 1 day from Clear Point. We were a time away from the coast that still had Juniper's picture living in my pocket and my throat. The long way north stretched to the horizon like a decision I had to keep remaking. "Rowan," Den said, using my name to stitch me back to where my hands needed to be. "You still going north?"
"I'm going wherever the absences line up and the water doesn't lie," I said.
"Today that's north." Hollis nodded once. "Book 2, he said, not as a performance, but as a way to tell his legs we were not starting and stopping and dying in the same chapter. Rule 47. When there's a next road, name it. Even if the name is a joke, you tell your fear. We walked the rescued 3 under the scrub to where the wind had less authority. We wrapped them in blankets that we could spare because we were traveling light the way the gospel had been teaching us since the red rain. We ate while the lake pretended not to watch. We packed quietly. We retied our rope. We checked the bowlines a second time without making it a lecture. Then we stood. We hooked our lines. We breathed. I stepped out first, not because I am a hero, but because I had listened to ice sing for 2 days and I thought I knew its verses. Behind me, the convoy breathed the way animals do at the edge of water. In front, the white lay down and told the truth briefly. I pressed my weight into the lake's argument and moved. The long way north began. Chapter 1, North Shore. Math we made landfall with our legs still speaking lake. The 3 we'd pulled from the edge, 2 tall, 1 small, shook like the shore was learning them back. We turned the sleds into benches and the tarp into a room and the stove into a responsibility. Hollis counted pulse out loud the way medics do when they're also convincing the rest of us that numbers are a kind of mercy. Slow rewarm, he said. Sip, rest, sip. No hot hands on cold feet. We coax, we don't conquer. The small one, Bean, I learned later, because you can't stop affection from naming things even when the world suggests restraint, stared at the flame like it had a plot. The tall woman kept touching the child's elbow like memory, like proof. The tall man watched the rope line we'd folded into a neat snake and didn't try to talk about it. Good sign. Rule 48. Warmth is a schedule, not a temperature. Sip heat. Layer heat.
Earn heat with patience. We broke camp lazy on purpose.
It looks like leisure. It's discipline. Hollis walked the perimeter with a stick and came back with 3 stories. Wolf, 2 hours old. Fox last night. Human days. He drew the tracks with his finger in sifted snow and made us speak them back. Den moved among the sleds and retied the knots the tall man had tied, not to shame him, but because rope is honesty and a convoy needs fewer liars than pride thinks it does. North Shore is not a line. It is a suggestion the lake makes when it is in a mood to be consistent. We hugged it without flirtation. Wind came out of the west with hands. It pushed our shoulders into forward. We let it because the wind can believe in you if you make it think the idea was its in the first place. Den set, spacing with string and glance. We've learned new gestures for convoy life. Palm down means lower your voice. 2 fingers like a fish means wake the rope, not the mouth. A tug of the ear means your hood is lying. Fix it before frost does. The 3 new ones learn them by watching. The way people learn the rules of a kitchen without needing to speak marinade. Anchor, the tall woman said once. Not to ask, just to put the word in the air where it could take some of the weight from her chest. South and east, I said back. She nodded, accepted the ritual of being believed. Our map became absences again. No ploughs, no dogs, no engine hum at noon. We found a culvert with a blue cloth tied to the right-hand fence post, water. We drank treated anyway. We saw a cartographer's mark on a milepost, the open eye with a question mark inside. We were near a line where people still measured distances with rules instead of stories. I rubbed my thumb over the grease pencil that had become my liturgy. Went up under a guardrail, small, where hands that needed permission found it, and hands that wanted trophies didn't. Rule 49. Plan the bailout before you break camp.
Where will you run if white comes?
Who holds rope if you don't? The answer should be a name, not a shrug. By mid-afternoon, the light took on a yellow sting, the way days do when they're about to end in weather. Hollis licked his finger and held it up out of habit. The wind worked the saliva into a small truth, falling barometer. We moved off the shore into a stand of jack pine that knew how to make a wall. Sleds nested, rope belayed, shovels out. Chapter 2. Digging rooms from weather. There's a moment halfway through building a snow trench when you stop being a person shoveling and become a person furnishing. We cut windward face. We carved leeward sleeping ledge. We smoothed the ceiling with a glove so drips would hesitate, not think. Den cut air vents with a stick and marked them with pine boughs so an exhausted night wouldn't forget where its lungs were. Bean pressed a palm into the entry wall. The print stayed a little too long. I took the stove down 1 notch, Rule 50. Be bold, start cold. Manage sweat like a leak. Wet kills politely. Don't let it. We slotted pads onto the ledge and hung the tarp as a door. Hollis taught the new ones the candle test, 1 tea light on a plate, a sentinel in the corner to scold our hubris if we forgot the vent. CO is shy and cruel, he said. Detectors die, tea lights report. We set the stove where it would talk to the ceiling, not the quilts. We cooked soupy food with salt and garlic and apology. We ate slow while the world fussed at the edge of our door and moved on. In the hours when conversation turns into breath, Den sketched the map on the wall with a stick. 2 ways north, she said. Ridge path, the zigzag that keeps us above ice.
River wrote, the bend that promises we can keep seeing sky.
Ridge is slower, safer. River is fast if it forgives, Ridge, Hollis said. Bean's cough doesn't want wind. I agreed, not just for Bean. Ridge is lots of small decisions. River's are one big one you don't get to edit mid-sentence. We banked the stove. We eased heat into sleeping bags as if we'd be asked to apologize if we stole too much. Bean's breath turned from staccato to story. I slept because the sound made my ears remember a house where the furnace came on at night and made everything taste like dust and safety. Rule 51. Make tomorrow's first task easy. Boots under blanket.
Mittens inside. Liner gloves in pocket.
Headlamp where your blind hand will find it without arguing. We woke to quiet so complete it made the candle louder.
Outside, white, clean and sincere.
Wind had cleaned the sky to blue tin. The lake pretended it had never tried to kill us. We broke down camp into little motions that add up to competence. We said the names of our tools out loud as they went into our packs, because speaking is inventory with breath. Chapter 3. Signals that have no breath mid-morning. The radio in my chest, a sense more than a device, prickled. Den saw me reach for my belt like a person checking a habit and stopped me with a slight headshake.
Air is public, her mouth said.
We waited instead. The wind carried a voice anyway, thin with distance and boosted by some leftover infrastructure. Help.
We're at then the thing I despise. Silence that pretends to be evidence.
Then, please, exactly the same length as the last please, not because the person had the same amount of fear twice, but because the recording did. Rule 52, ask for breath. If a voice can't spare you 3 inhales between words, you're talking to a loop or a liar. Hollis lifted his hand and we stopped. Den traced a pattern on her sleeve with a finger. 3 dashes, count, 2 dots, count, 1 dash. Our way of asking, are you human right now?
On air without asking the air.
I pressed the PTT on the low-power handheld and spoke like a person who wanted to be boring. 3, 2, 1, I said, and counted loud enough for only careful ears. Nothing, then the same please, no breath.
No count, no miscount even, no grace mistake. Choir, Den said. The word not quite a curse. Kid voices again.
Or lesson copycats. Either way, bait, we moved. That was our answer. I left a mark on the milepost for the cartographers, circle with a slash and 2 short dashes, loop at this mile.
A warning you can read without time.
The tall woman, Mira, she finally said, our names always arriving last, watched my hands and copied the slash in the snow with her mitt. She didn't say she'd teach Bean, she didn't have to. By noon, the ridge gave us a view of the next town, Black Hook, named for the way a spit of land jabbed into the lake like a punctuation mark the weather had got wrong. At the far end of the hook, a tower.
Not a lighthouse. A light on a tower.
Glass still.
Wrong blink. Den squinted.
Amani's code is 121 and cut.
That's 112, she said.
Either their shutter is sulking or someone is knocking wrong. Or someone wants to practice on us, Hollis said. He kicked snow off his boot like it had tried to sign a contract without reading it. Rule 53. Verify in 2 domains. Light agrees with rope. Breath agrees with both. If one lies, you're talking to a performance, not a place. Chapter 4. A lighthouse that lies. Black Hook had once sold itself as a summer. The boardwalk boasted shop names that sounded like ice creams. The life rings on the rails had words painted in cheerful fonts, now more ghost than pigment. The tower wasn't a union lamp. It had a salvaged lens and a flame that performed. Blink pattern 112, pause 112. It was either a broken record or an amateur composition. We took the long way through backyards because front porches are stages.
A figure in a green jacket stepped out 2 stores up and held a hand up, palm empty.
"Approach," they said, but the vowels were too round. Den frowned.
Union doesn't use approach as a verb, she murmured. We stopped short of the boardwalk.
Hollis lifted his hand, 2 short tugs on the rope at his belt. The rear answered with 2.
That wasn't for them.
That was for us, our rope saying what our mouths could not. "Blink 121, Den called, not loud, just enough for someone who could read to read. The lamp blinked 112. Wrong. The green jacket's eyes flicked up and left too sharp, toward someone on the roof with a mirror, maybe, or toward a child who had practiced counting without learning caution. I put my hand out like the river had asked me to share space.
"Well, we lost someone south," I said. "We need water."
"We have skills." "Welcome to Black Hook," the green jacket said, teeth fine, posture rehearsed. "We have salt. We have shelter. We run the light now because the Union abandoned it."
"They take too much."
"Their tax is not reasonable." Den showed her token, stamped with Isla's hammer and dot. The green jacket didn't look. That told us everything we needed. Rule 54. If a gatekeeper doesn't read what you show, they came for your skin, not your rules. We asked for 3 breaths.
"Count with me," I said.
3, 2, 1. The green jacket blinked, confused. On the tower, the light blinked 112 again, like a person practicing a language and counting, repeating mistakes as progress. Hollis picked a safer direction with his chin. "We'll draw water at the pump 2 blocks over," he said, as if talking to a friend who hadn't upset him. "We'll leave salt if there's room on your shelves." He turned without flinch. Bean, to their everlasting credit, did not run. Mira took their elbow lightly. We moved. The green jacket didn't call after us. That told us either they had patience or an audience or both. We filled water where the cartographers had marked blue on a mailbox. We left salt anyway sealed. We marked the mark for no linger. We did not sleep in their town. We went back to Ridge with a march that said we had time. The tower blinked until early dusk, and then, when the first honest wind of evening blew in, it cut. Late. A performer, with a poor sense of timing. We made camp above the hook where our rope could talk to pines instead of people. We set 2 sentries with string instead of eyes. Den taught Mira the tug code. Bean slept with a wool hat down over their eyebrows and a mitten clenched in their fist. I slept with my boots in the bag and my radio in a sock because cold erases batteries before it erases optimism. In the night, wind tried a few notes. We did not hum back. Chapter 5. Whiteout. Again and the child. We woke to the kind of morning that pretends to be blank. By mid-morning, the banked weather came back over the ridge like a person who forgot their keys. White tight, no sky. Wind from the west again, but bigger, like it had eaten a bad idea, and was coming to brag. We tied in, rope on harness, not checked twice, tethers between bodies 3 long strides, pickets buried where the ridge narrowed. Den set the compass line with the reverence you reserve for old aunts. Hollis kept the tally, 30, rest, 30, rest, because brains need rhythm when the world removes landmarks. Bean did it once, then twice. On the 3rd pause, their breath ran away from them. They took 3 rapid steps toward a sound that wasn't a sound, wind swirling in a culvert making child hum. Mira grabbed at Bean's coat instinctively and missed. That is how stories get worse. Rule 55. Tether before tears. Clip the runner with rope, not with your hands.
Hold ground.
Throw line. Talk them back. Den was already moving. She sank to one knee. Anchor posture. "Bean!" she called, not loud. The way you say a name when you want the name to become a blanket again. She flaked the throw line with practiced wrists. She threw not at Bean, but ahead of them into the arc where they would run if they kept being human. The weight at the end of the line made a quiet thump in the snow. Bean's glove hit rope like good accident. Hollis hauled slow. Bean's boots did a bit of that wrong dance snow teaches when it wants to make you fall. Bean flattened. Mira got small and still instead of big and fast. Den hauled. The world resisted because that's part of the rules. We won because we had practiced being less interesting than panic. Bean came back, sobbing and furious at their own lungs. Mira counted her own breath out loud, not for Bean, for herself. In 4.
Out 6. In 4. Out 6. Bean mirrored because children are scientists first, then people. We set the tent there, inside the storm's decision.
We dug down again. We turned another trench into another room. We hung the tarp.
We set the candle.
We set the stove. We made tea that tasted like sternness and sugar. We told Bean a story about a bird that fakes a broken wing to save its nest, killdeer, and how it works not because the bird prays, but because the bird practices. Bean fell asleep mid-sip.
Mira's hand shook exactly once.
She hid it by adjusting the tea. Hollis pretended to not see and actually did not see because he was counting a pulse that mattered. Rule 56. Panic is contagious. Give tasks their names. People become hands again faster that way. While we waited for the white to lose its case, the radio hummed a different tune. Lantern Union, this is Black Hook Light, it said. Repeat, Black Hook, clear beacon. All welcome under code 121. Imani had taught us better than to answer. Den took out the token stamped with the hammer and dot and set it beside the stove like an altarpiece. She whispered the code in the rhythm Imani used, 121, cut at the hour. We all mouthed it because some prayers are engineering. By late afternoon, the white went from sermon to lecture. We packed our room and made it look like weather instead of us. We moved again, slower, north toward a line that would lead to an inlet that had not learned the word harbour yet, but would soon. Chapter 6. Rope, light, breath, and a handshake. Harrow Inlet isn't on the Atlas of Absences. The surveyor had run out of grease pencil at the last page, but the cartographers had marked a symbol we hadn't seen yet on a driftwood post a mile out, a small square with an X inside. Den grinned.
Keepers, she said.
Lakefolk, not union, but cousins. Harrow was a clutch of shacks built with a confidence I admire, angles set to cheat wind, doors set to cheat flood, roofs set to cheat weight. A woman with hair, rope braided under a felt hat, raised her hand.
Not palm this time, a fist closed, then opened. Our kind of hello.
She wore oilskin and on the lapel a pin that was just a piece of brass punched with 3 holes. Park your noise outside, she said. Bring your rope, we did. In the gathering dark, under a leaning awning that had seen 100 such nights, they taught us their handshake, because handshakes keep getting invented as often as betrayals do. We don't speak through air unless we have to, the woman said. We speak through rope. We speak through light. We speak through breath. She took a line and taught tug sequences we didn't have. 2 short, 1 long for safe passage granted. 1 long, 1 short for problem at the gate. 3 shorts for friend on the line. She showed us how to clip a lantern under a bucket and blink its light against the shore without making the sky feel included. 121 for union. 212 for keepers at Harrow. Small differences that save lives if you pay attention. Then the breath, a code for close in, 2 breaths in through nose, 2 out through mouth, used by sentries so they could identify each other in blind when grit makes your eyes liars.
We count each other's lungs, she said.
It's hard to fake. Rule 57, make a second factor the weather can't forge. Rope plus light plus breath. If 2 agree, the third is proof. We showed them ours, rope knocks from Midland, light discipline from Imani, the tea light in the corner of the room's ceiling. They approved us with the shrug respect gives to competence. We traded labour. We helped lash a new brace under the dock where Thor had turned wood soft. Hollis showed them a way to pack a hand warmer together with a small rock in a wool sock to make a surprisingly competent kidney stove for a sick elder. Bean showed a boy with a missing glove how to keep his hands in his armpits and breathe into his throat, not his hands, to control shiver. In return, the Harrow keepers gave us dirt stories. Black Hook had been theirs once, then it had been no one's. Then it had become the choir's practice room with a mouth too smart for itself. They copied Union Blink wrong and wouldn't be taught, the braid woman said. We ignore their light. We count breath instead. She unfolded a map drawn on sailcloth and tapped a cove 2 days north. Gullspine, she said. A point where the ice holds last and the fish hold longer.
People hold with them.
They knock like we do. Rope 212, light 1 long, 2 short. Breath quiet. You can winter there if winter insists. Anchor? Mira asked, not greedy. Just wanting to be right about something for once this year. South and east, the woman said. You'll hear it 3 towns from the old ferry if you listen like a person who knew the place before the river did. She said it as if she'd been the one to write. Safe for now in a text that never finished sending. Slept under Harrow's roof in a row of bodies that had learned to make a room warm just by agreeing to be near. Bean slept between Mira and Rope and breathed the child breath that tells you tomorrow is a possibility. I dreamed of Juniper again, not the pier this time. A street of sand that dragged when you walked on it. She wasn't alone in the dream. She was counting a grid with someone at her side I didn't recognize. Relief is a rude guest. It woke me anyway. In the morning we practiced the handshake in wind because that's when you need it. 2 short, 1 long. Friend, 1 long, 1 short. Not now. 1-2-1 union, 2-1-2 Harrow. Breath on 2. We wrote it on sailcloth in small letters and put it away even smaller because some languages you keep in your bones. Rule 58. Put your codes where weather can't erase them. In your muscles.
On your tongue, under your ribs. We set out with the Harrow keeper's blessing and the lake at our left shoulder again.
Wind called us impolite names. We ignored it. The ridge carried us. The long way remained long. Black Hook's light blinked behind us, late and wrong, and we left it to its audience. By afternoon, the repeater we'd woken back in the last book breathed a rumour. Glass point, 2 blinks, pause, 1, union, clear, repeat. Den looked at me sideways and didn't say the obvious. Hollis answered with Rope, 2 short to the rear, then 1 long, our new mask on your mouth. Watch with your hands. We would have to approach Glass Point when we got there. We would have to decide whether to answer a voice that sounded like it had been taught how to lie. We would have to use rope plus light plus breath and prove whether the air could be trusted or not. We moved. We breathed in 4 out 6. We watched the horizon where the lake met the idea of land and kept it where it belonged, in front of us and never closer than we could earn. Glass. Point blinked through a veil of blown ice like a story told twice. On the repeater, union clear. On the lens, wrong rhythm, 1, 1, 2. The air wanted us fast. The light wanted us careful. We settled the convoy in a lee a 1/4 mile off, sleds in a crescent, rope clipped high, pickets down like punctuation marks. Harrow's rope handshake lived in my forearm. Den traced the shutter code with a gloved finger on her knee. 1-2-1, cut. I tapped it back on my sleeve, a metronome set to skepticism. Rule 59. When radio says yes and glass says maybe, follow glass. Air lies easier than lenses. We sent the small team. Den, me, Hollis, Mira insisted, soft and immovable. I carry Bean better than he carries himself if we need to move. Bean stayed with Harrow's keeper at the sleds, taught to answer rope, not voices. We approached at a bias, never head on. feet finding the scabbed snow between drifts. The tower sat on a low bluff, concrete base, windowed lantern room wrapped in metal grating that would hum in wind. The lower door had been reinforced with pallet wood, which is either competence or costume. A bucket hung under a small lamp at the lee corner, a keeper trick. The light could blink against the ground without becoming a headline. That lamp was dark. The main lamp blinked again. 1, 1, 2. A figure in a tide-stained parka stepped out to the catwalk and raised a hand, palm out. The posture was right. The wrist was wrong, stiff, returned from holding a tool, not a habit. He cupped the lantern glass, glanced inland, then back. If you've ever watched a person check whether their boss is watching before they make a decision, you know the shape. Approach, he called. The wind ate half the word. Den lifted her hand and showed 2 fingers, then 1, our silent ask for breath, then count. 3, she said low. 2, 1, the parka man said nothing.
Inside, behind his shoulder, a smaller hand slapped the glass and vanished.
The parka man flinched, and a second figure's shadow moved, jerky, like someone whose posture had learned mean. Rule 60. If a place misses your count, it missed the point. Don't teach etiquette at a gate. Change gates! We moved not forward, but down, off the bluff edge into the spill of beached ice, then under the catwalk's shadow where the wind forgot us. The bucket lamp at the lee corner was wired to a small battery, union discipline, but the wire had been cut and twisted together again with tape that liked to talk. Den touched the tape with 1 finger. It rasped. Poor repair. Not Imani's hand. We waited there, counting our own lungs. 2 in, 2 out.
Harrow's breath code.
The bucket lamp flickered, barely, then steadied, then flickered twice. Blink discipline without power is a confession. Someone inside still remembered. Den leaned close.
We've got a prisoner with grammar, she whispered.
We answer with rope, not mouths. We tied a short line to a drift pin and tapped the catwalk's underside. 2 short.
1 long, Harrow's safe if you can make it. A reply.
Faint. Somewhere in the bracework. 1 long, 1 short.
Not now. Eyes, Den breathed.
So close, but watched. A shout from the inland side beyond the tool shed. A voice like gravel performing kindness. Friends, it called. We saw your carts.
We can shelter you.
Children welcome. It had that warmed-over quality you get when you travelled through too many gates, waving the same sentence. Mira's hand found the small bone at Bean's wrist in her mind and clenched air. She stayed still. Hollis's head tilted. He listened for breath in words and heard none. I touched the bucket lamp's cut wire. It had enough old battery left to speak twice more if it had help. I unpocketed a coin cell and a paperclip and made a lyre into a bridge. The lamp stuttered to life, not bold, just enough to write a syllable on the snow.
1, 2, 1, cut. The parka man's shoulder turned. A hand reached fast to snuff it.
He missed because wind loved us a little just then.
Inside, a second code. 2 long, 1 short. Harrow's caution.
The air kept saying yes. The glass and rope kept refusing. Rule 61, build for interruption. If your signal needs help, carry a paperclip. If your person needs help, carry a second word for no. We didn't take the door. We took the sea. A narrow slot under the bluff led to the foundation's service hatch, a metal plate with 4 bolts and rust that had pretended to marry. Den and I worked the wrench slow, turn, count wind gusts, stop, listen. Inside, a crawl space that smelled like salt, old rope, wet concrete, and a fear that wore itself tidy. The prisoner wasn't tied. He was cornered. A teen, 15, 16, with a lantern keeper's hands, calloused in the wrong places for guitar and the right places for shutters. He held his breath like he'd been told breath would betray him. When Den pressed a finger to her lips, he nearly cried, which would have been honest and lethal. He didn't. We crept the service stairs. On the landing, Two men with earnest vests and a lack of the right kinds of dirt under their nails. Choir-adjacent noise missionaries. One had a radio on his belt, mic angled toward his mouth like prayer. The other had the posture of a person who had learned to secure the perimeter from television, not from rope. We didn't fight. We did rope language. Two short, one long on the steel with a bolt head. From outside, Harrow's quarter-mile off. A faint, two short, one long reply carried by ice. Then a bucket lamp under a tarp on the ridge blinked 121 behind us. The keepers promised to be watching. The men on the landing heard none of it. They were tuned to air. We made it to the lantern room just as the Parker man lifted the shutter to blink wrong again. Den's hand closed his wrist. My hand closed the shutter. 121, I said, and counted 3 breaths. He flinched, then nodded, the kind of nod that belongs to people who signed a bad contract and were waiting for a way to violate it without dying. Behind us, gravel voice swelled. "Friends!" Then a child's please, recorded, looped. The keeper teen had the small scream lodged under his tongue. He turned it into a count instead. 3, 2, 1. We opened the lower door from inside. Hollis was a medic, not a soldier. He stood like a stone that didn't need to be bigger to do its job. The vests did not understand rock. They understood show. They shouted. The wind borrowed their ideology and flung it into the lake where it made no converts. Den tied the lantern code rope to my belt. "Blink right," she said.
I did 121 cut.
3 times.
Then nothing.
The vests ran out of doctrine or breath. The boy with the shutter took the rope and sobbed once into it so the sound would go into steel, not air. We left Glass Point at dusk with the right blink alive and the wrong voice laughing into its own echo. The bucket lamp burned out a mile from us. The paperclip stayed with the boy. I gave him my coin cell because I won't need it if I need it again. He gave me the brass pin from his lapel, 3 holes. I clipped it to my pack strap under the flap, where only people that mattered would see. Rule 62, fix a place, not a person. Leave a better code than you found. Take less than you think you earned. Chapter 8, The Second Knife. We met him again by accident or design, Fenton's traveller with the new knife that had looked new forever. He stepped out from behind a blown drift at a culvert bend where the ridge path dropped toward a gully. He had less swagger and more hunger. He also had company. 2 men whose faces had learned to press into collars when wind threatened to notice them. "Rowan," he said, as if we were cousins. He had learned my name by staying in rooms he should have left sooner. "You owe me salt." "I owe you a lesson," I said.
"But those don't travel well," he laughed, smaller than last time.
"You'll be proud of me."
"I joined the light." He jerked his chin toward Glass Point. "We do good."
"We shelter. We don't tax mothers like Union does." "The Union taxes repetition," Den said. "You don't pay once for the light. You pay every night you want it to be true." He shrugged, an animal shifting its weight inside a too small shape. "We need your radio," he said, and hurt himself because he meant want. Hollis breathed slow enough to make him mad. "You can borrow it while I hold it," he said. "Same as we told you at Clearpoint." "That's not what we want," one of Fenton's friends said, eyes flicking to the sleds like hands. "We want ours," Bean coughed at the wrong time. It was not a huge sound. It was the only sound that mattered in the next 10 seconds. The friend's eyes went there. Mira didn't flinch, didn't move Bean behind her exactly. She moved the air between them and Bean like you move furniture before a storm. Hollis shifted just enough to be a bigger problem than the problem. I took the brass pin off my strap and held it where Fenton could see. "You know this?" I asked. He frowned. The frown was real. "Arrow," he said. "My grandmother used to tie knots for a keeper. She said rope tells the truth." "Then listen," I said, and tapped. 2 short, 1 long on the culvert's rim. From beyond the bend under the drift, a reply, 2 short, 1 long. Harrow had friends in earshot. The men didn't hear. The drift did. The brass circle on my index finger felt heavier. Fenton breathed a word that might have been sorry if it had woken up earlier in his life. He put his hands up at the shoulders. His friends didn't. The wind took the choice out of them. It shoved. They stumbled. They revealed enough of their collars that Den saw knives that weren't new. She did not draw hers. She did math. Rule 63. If a fight costs more rope than you can spare, pay with distance and leave the debt at the door. We stepped back, slow, line tight. Fenton didn't follow. He didn't leave either. He existed, which is sometimes an improvement. The friends melted into the culvert bend and learned nothing, or learned something. It's not my job to grade them. We aimed for a hollow as the sky got complicated, pewter and teeth. We saw the first edge of the front stack over the lake, a line like a door coming down too fast. Whiteout. Again. This one would have opinions. Chapter 9, Field Hospital, in a bowl. When wind is rude enough. Bowls are churches. We found one, a skate park blown free of graffiti by sand and time, concrete, smooth and curved and apology-shaped. We turned it into a ward. Hollis scrubbed his hands with snow and soap until they stung. He taught us triage while Cold tried to argue.
Airway breathing circulation, he said.
Then warm, then talk. If you can ask a person to squeeze your hand with both hands, you can ask them to drink. If they can't tell you their name, you write it on their wrist with a grease pencil so the panic doesn't steal it. Rule 64. Medical order is not optional.
Air first. Heat second.
Pride last. Den and I laid out the kit. Pressure dressings, triangular bandages we made out of shirts, a little bag of amoxicillin I hoarded like childhood. Mira wrapped Bean's chest in a wool scarf and counted breath.
A harrow keeper, Anna, arrived out of the drift with rope tied to her belt and a pulley block dragged like a pet. Someone fell through not far back, she said.
We pulled. She's breathing. She's cold in the old way. 2 more keepers followed, carrying a woman on a sled made of doors. We lit the stove, small and mean, disciplined flame, under a kettle, black with history. We set a tea light at the ceiling of an underledge to police our vent. The bowl concentrated wind above us and forgot to enter. Hollis triaged out loud.
Red door sled, old Cold, he said.
Yellow Bean, watch for re-chill. Green, Mira, Den, Anna, work.
Rowan, radio here only. No talk. He gave me his med voice and I obeyed.
Obedience is not civility. It's survival. We warmed the woman like the world was fragile, and we were also hot water bottle at armpits and groin, fleece against skin, dry socks that felt like church. We didn't rub. We didn't celebrate. We timed her breath. We counted it like we counted rope. In 4.
Out 6, Hollis said. Not to her, but to us.
She found the count like a tracer line. We fed sugar to the right mouths and salt to others. We kept our ventilation honest. We turned the bowl into a chorus of small tasks done right. Outside, Glass Point lied to an empty beach. Inside, we made the truth. The old cold woman woke enough to swear at us softly. Got you, Hollis said, half-smile. She cried one polite tear. We pretended to be surprised and were not. Rule to 65. When you make a hospital in weather, build it out of verbs. Carry, count, warm, breathe.
Nouns won't save you. By midnight, the front had slammed through and left its opinions lying around like towels.
Stars came back by 3s. The bowl radiated its debt to the sky. Our breath turned to chalk. We banked the stove. We took turns sleeping with our hands on the rope that ran around the inner rim, clipped at intervals to harness loops, sentry by touch. The radio crackled once with the lazy please from Black Hook. We let air sing to itself. By morning, the woman sat up and told us her name, Triss. She had lived somewhere with a windbreak and a bad stove, and a man who believed in enough more than she did. She had left. The lake had argued. She had lost the argument and been found by Harrow's pulley. We added an extra ring to the lashing on her sled. Rule 66. Celebrate with soup, not certainty. Count pulses, not victories. We broke the hospital and returned the bowl to concrete and wishes. We left our mark small where hands would find. Pied eye with question, and Harrow's 212 scratched under the lip. Chapter 10. Gull's spine and the split gull's spine pinched the lake into a narrow throat. Ice held there longer. Fish did too. People built their houses and their rules by watching both. The keepers marked it with the square and X on a pole and a lantern under a bucket that blinked at knee height. 212, Harrow's hello. We came in slow and met 3 rope lines before we met a face. Outer,
Middle, inner.
each demanded a handshake. Den tugged 2 short, 1 long. A reply came in the rope like a cat purr. The middle line asked for breath. 2 in, 2 out. The inner blinked a notch we'd learned tonight, 1 short through shade. An economy code for, you're not strangers, even if you won't say your names. Inside the spine, a dozen shacks and a longhouse made of 2 garages welded by drift and faith. On a corner post, someone had carved a child's handprint and an adult's next to it, and between them a triangle with a dot. I put my hand against the wood and felt the grain hold my heat. Gullspine had opinions about convoy size. Hollis met with their elder, Aya, hair braided tight against wind, and looked slow at our line. Hospital wants me, he said, meaning the longhouse where they kept tools and people and stories. The inlet's children want Den, the south wants you. Mira watched Bean eat stew and didn't pretend to be indifferent to the prospect of walls. I can winter here, she said, meaning she would teach and be taught and make a space that behaved like a tomorrow. She looked at me and didn't. The rest of the sentence lived under the stew. Rule 67. Splits happen at places that deserve people. Leave a piece of yourself as a promise to come back, even if the map disagrees. We talked in rope, not hair. Den tied a bowline around my wrist and around hers, then loosened it and let it fall so it became a loop that would work again later. She put it in my pocket along with a stub of grease pencil. Anchor is south and east, she said, but the coast is 1,000 doors. You pick the ones that like your knock. If the map goes wrong, Harrow's breath will tell you when you're center. Hollis pressed a small roll of bandage into my palm. For when success bleeds anyway, he said. It will. He looked at Bean and the Bowl Hospital and the inlet and at Mira's hand on Bean's shoulder and said a word that wanted to be sorrow and was actually respect. We'll hold, he said. You go. We ate our share and saved our portion. We slept under roof once without guilt. In the morning, I left my mark on a driftwood beam low and hidden and brave. But next to it, Aya's square and X and Harrow's bucket blink symbol. The longhouse felt like a lung. We left it breathing. Den came with me because string doesn't stop being string when it finds a good post. 2 keepers walked a mile with us and then didn't because opinions are local. We aimed for a cut where the coast turned sandy and the wind turned into letters without vowels. The map showed absences that lined up for 3 days. Anchor lived at the end of a set of decisions, not at the end of a road. My sister's picture lived at the bottom of my pack and at the top of my spine. I could feel it. Chapter 11, the air lies, the light helps, rope. Saves fog is a lake's lie. Dune fog is worse. It holds light like a thief holds cash, close and miscounted. It rolled in at noon like a grandparent in a mood. The repeater coughed at the exact wrong time. Rowan, copy? This is Anchor Security. Report your party. We have room. Den looked at me like you look at a child who just said, I promise, very loud. She didn't let me touch the radio.
Air is public, her mouth said again.
I'm going to have it tattooed on my wrist by spring. We stopped on purpose and made a room out of canvas and posture. We shaped the sound of our steps into untellable. The radio repeated itself, too clean, no breath. The phrase "have room" is not a coastal thing. It's a warehouse thing. Anchor, if it was anchor, would say "water right now," or "hands at the gate," or "wind in your face." Tie it. Rule 68. Real places speak nouns. Fakes offer hospitality like product. Fog pressed.
We used rope.
Den clipped me to the dune fence line with a munter and a prusik and set pickets every 20 yards. We counted breaths. She knocked our knock, 2 short, 1 long, on a steel post with a carabiner. Silence. Then, far left, a reply. 2 short, 1 long. I answered with 1 long, 1 short, not now, so we wouldn't converge blind. The reply blinked a bucket lamp from under a piece of tarp. 121, then 212.
Union plus Harrow, a cousin.
Rope talked before air could lie again. We moved toward the blink in a bracket, not a line. 2 steps, pause, 2 breaths, touch the rope, keep the compass clean. The radio tried twice more with my name. Den said I could record it if I wanted souvenirs.
I didn't. The bucket lamp under tarp sat with a keeper post like a lighthouse taught to be humble.
Beside it, a figure with a knit cap and a rope harness, breath accountable, 2 in, 2 out. They lifted a hand in the rope people way, closed fist, open. The handshake. We answered with tugs, 2 short, 1 long. They answered with 1 long, 1 short, not now, and pointed with rope to a hollow between dunes. There, under a lean-to of reed and miracle, sat 4 people who had read maps with their feet. 2 were keepers who'd been running bucket lamps like fireflies between camps in fog. 1 was a woman with a face like wind who had the cartographer's eye-pin hung on a thread. The 4th was a child with a marker and a piece of sailcloth, drawing a triangle with a dot in the middle.
A hand at a time, as if to learn it with muscle.
Not just mind. Black Hook's air travelled north, the wind woman said. They used the repeater we share to audition as us. We cut the circuit. It is their favourite trick this month. We answer only by light and rope until fog has manners. I nailed the pin, 3 holes, back onto my strap, where she could see it. She nodded. We used the same thrift store once, maybe. Anchor?
I asked, letting my mouth be greedy one time. South and east, she said. Not as comfort, just information.
Follow the culvert line, concrete posts every 30. When dune grass bends, you're near the river mouth. If you smell iodine on a calm day, you're on the flats, which want to be a mirror. Don't trust a mirror that thinks it's ground. We moved with them for an hour, so the fog would have to learn 4 people's shapes instead of 2. The radio gave up. The bucket lamps learned each other until the fog forgot to separate them. And then it was me. The moment rope saved me in a way the air never could. We crossed a shallow swale between dunes. The sand under the top layer had decided to impersonate water. It held and then didn't. My left foot sank mid-calf. The right followed because humans are symmetrical first, intelligent second. I pitched forward. The prusik on the line bit and made the rope into a sentence that ended with me stopping. Den's anchor arm took the load. Her body turned into the word we had earned with repetition. The keeper on the post tightened the munter back up without thinking about knots, and that's not a contradiction. It's competence. The world tried to lower me, Rope argued. Rope 1, Rule 669, tie the prusik before you need it, not after. Gravity prefers improvisers. Don't improvise your life. We backed me out like a truck. 2 steps, rest, 2 steps, rest. I came onto the grass and decided I believed in plants again. The fog laughed in its damp voice. We laughed back because we had rope and breath and a lamp under a bucket and people who kept their radios in their bags when the air got cute. We made camp behind a snag that used to be a lifeguard stand. The fog loosened slightly, enough that lanterns blinked across sand like punctuation marks at the right height.
Harrows 212, Unions 121.
A new sequence I didn't know blinked low and angled, 1 short, 2 long. The wind woman nodded at it and wrote a little square in the sand with X inside. Anchor, cousin, she said. Rivermouth folk. They blink sideways because light on water hates rules. You'll like them. They like knock languages more than dinner conversation. Den grinned with that small, fierce thing she does when she meets a new rule set. My people, she said, we slept on reed matting that knew how to keep damp out of bones. In the night, a voice on the repeater tried again, Rowan, and I smiled in the dark because it got my name wrong. It put the stress on the wrong syllable. Nobody from home does that. Chapter 12. South and East. Fog thinned at dawn, moving in sheets that behaved like toddlers. The culvert line appeared, concrete posts with rust scars every 30 paces, the only straight things the dunes would tolerate. We clipped in 2 at a time and moved as if we were combing hair. The smell changed, peat, iodine, old tide secrets. A gull hinged the air with a rusty hinge sound and went nowhere because wind had it. We followed the line south and east. A keeper with a bucket lamp left us at a cone of dredge pipe and pointed with rope to the place where water decided to become river. 3 cousins down, she said. They do whistles with breath, 2 slow for friend, 3 fast for work. They don't say anchor in daylit air. They'll say home like a test. Don't say it back until they give you soup. We felt the river before we saw it. The lift under sand where water's back sits close. The dunes flattened into flats that were not. The river spread its mouth into a sheet of guesswork. We stepped only where reed stubble made a sentence. The bucket lamp blinked from inside a storm shutter at knee height, 1 short, 2 long. River folk, Den knocked, 2 short, 1 long. A reply in wood, 1 long, 1 short. Then breath, 2 in, 2 out. The air moving like a living thing, not a recording. They opened the shutter a hand's width.
Eyes first. Rope visible.
Lantern under bucket.
No engine, no halo, no sales pitch.
You lost or looking? The woman inside asked, voice like low tide. Looking, I said, and didn't say for what, because the river knows when you confess too early. South and east, she nodded. Cousin Soup, then, she said.
And a map we don't write. We crawled into a room that had corners and a stove that sighed like the inlet longhouse.
They fed us fish and thin bread and the taste of the coast's forgiveness. On a shelf by the door, a row of lapel pins, brass, 3 holes. Mine had a twin there. The woman saw it on my strap and didn't smile but did breathe differently for a second. This is how home works now. Your breath changes when a stranger's habit is your habit too. Anchor? I asked finally, like a person who might be ready for the answer Alexander wanted from the Gordian knot before cheating. Home, she said immediately.
South and east.
Causeways if the tide agrees.
Under the old bridge if the pilings don't argue.
Rope 3 lines, river, light, breath. No air until you can see the pier that didn't learn to sell itself. I wanted to cry and didn't because I have rules.
I almost broke them and didn't because I have Den.Rule 70, name home last.
Say rope first, light second, breath third. If the place is what you think, it will say home for you. Den spread our map and erased lines we didn't need anymore with a finger. She wrote rope knocks where roads used to be. The woman traced the absences. This bridge is a liar, she said, tapping. This dune is a friend. She circled a contour and wrote, smell sea fennel here. That's your right cut on fog days. She put her pin in my palm and closed my fingers around it like she was dimming a lantern. We left with new knots and a promise not to say the right word out loud. The flats rang like a drum under our boots. A heron lifted its legs and forgot to fly because it knew it didn't need to. The sand kept our secrets because we stepped where reed stubble spoke and where bucket lights blinked under shutters. The air tried one last time. Rowan, it said, sweet as a lie. I answered with 2 breaths and no words, south and east. The flat spoke in iodine and gull, a low grammar the river used when it argued with the sea. Between the mud's shine and the wind's bad manners, the old causeways rose, skinny blacktop on pilings, guardrails gnawed by rust and exactitude. The posts had staff gauges painted in ladder hash, numbers gone, lines still there. Even without numbers, you can read a tide board the way you read breath. Are we going up or down? We watched rack lines, a braid of eelgrass, and plastic ghosts thrown high by last tide. We watched fiddlers, whether they danced above the burrow or vanished at once. We watched the birds, sandpipers hustle at the lip when the water is leaving, stand on one leg and look thoughtful when it's coming back. Smell helped too. Outgoing tide is leaf and salt. Flood carries iron. Rule 71, tides are schedules, not opinions. Read rack birds, smell. Don't argue. Plan. South and east, the culvert line kept us honest. Posts at 30-pace apology intervals, flaking concrete under finger. Den ran a fingertip along the cold edge of a staff gauge. Falling, she said. We have a window. We had, if you believe the rule of twelfths, 3 gentle hours, then 3 less gentle ones. Then the sea remembers she is boss. We stepped onto the first causeway, a scar across shine. The wind tried to climb into our coats. The water below turned from mirror to micro-rapids, chewing the uprights with polite ferocity. On the rail, someone had tied blue cloth at a height fresh wet, had not reached today. And on the near post, lo, the harrow bucket blink under shutter, 212 one time. Cousins had passed and left small proof. Feet on this kind of narrow ground must learn diplomacy. Don't stomp, don't tiptoe. Wait place like a signature you've practiced. Den kept us in single file, a rope length between, harness clipped to a line she ran low along the inside rail, Prusix tied loose enough to slide, tight enough to catch. The rope spoke, too short, pace.
One long halt. Our hands answered without asking mouths' permission. Halfway, a truck lay sunk in the flats like a whale that had believed a chart.
Its cab had provided somebody a room once. Barnacles made its new windows. On the roof, a child's shoe, washed and set there by someone who understood small altars. I touched my strap where the brass 3-hole lived and let the shoe instruct my pace. You do not hurry past shrines the tide has built. Rule 72, on narrow ground, your breath sets the metronome.
2 in, 2 out, harrows count.
Make your lungs the signal. The second causeway levelled into a place where the asphalt broke to ribs. Rebar showed black as old bone. We slowed to test each rib with a pole, talk with the ground before asking it to carry us. The wind shifted by a syllable.
Iodine thickened. Flood beginning to rehearse.
We cleared the last rib as the flats brightened with a film that made them geology and mirror at once. We sheltered in the lee of a pump house shell, 4 walls, a roof, like a held breath. On the concrete, a cartographer's eye with a question mark inside. Den smiled because language travelled the way rope did, hand to hand. Beneath it, a harrow chain of tugs scratched in metal. 2 short, 1 long. We were still inside a conversation. We knew how to join. Chapter 14, Low Tide. Algebra, low tide makes promises people die keeping. It lay before us all flats and shine, a broad idea that wanted to be a highway. Den leaned into the wind and shook her head. We take the old plank, she said, meaning the line of slatted decking that ran on creosote uprights just above the mud, too low to be rowed, too high to be obvious. It had been built for maintenance crews before someone forgot that was a job. Planks creaked, nails lifted and reconsidered their loyalties. We moved with that frog-in-winter carefulness, testing board ends with the pole, pointing at soft patches that looked like ground and were not. The mud tried to flatter our boots by refusing to return them at the same depth we offered. Den's rope line kept a sentence between us and the flats, prolific confidence. Rule 73. Your boots are tools, not heirlooms.
Cut them if they become teeth.
Keep the foot. Let the leather drown. At the level where plank gave way to patchwork, a section had gone missing. The only means across was a line of I-beams, set like piano keys, wet, muscle-edged, ambitious. Under them, a gutter full of water that had opinions about haste. Den clipped me to the rail with a quick munter hitch and tested a beam with her boot. It sang damp, it held. 2 steps, hand on flange, slide. 2 steps, hand slide. She made the body into a series of stable verbs. My 3rd step hummed wrong. The pitch, a little glass, too thin. The left boot scissored. The beam shifted. Gravity auditioned me. The prusik on my tether bit into the low rope. My harness took the sentence. Den's hip sank, anchor again not loud. I breathed, 2 in, 2 out, like Harrow had given me the meter for this verse.
I found the next flange with the edge of my boot.
I did not insult the water by pretending it would be kind. A shadow moved to our right, under the causeway, an egret with a fish that looked bigger than algebra. It made the mistake only once, and then learned again what to hold and what to let go. On the far side we sat with backs to creosote and let our calves write their complaint, in cold. Den didn't say good job. She tapped the rope, too short. Continue. The hum pulled us forward. You don't rest on narrow ground. You finish the sentence and then have your feelings beyond the period. Rule 74. Praise after shelter. Compliments in wind are hostages to the next step. We came off the last plank into marsh that had made peace with the river. Starved grass and reed stubble announced the season like a proclamation. Tide reversed in our noses, less iron, more leaf. Between 2 posts, a line of shells had been hung on strings, a clattergate. We knocked with rope, 2 short, 1 long. No light. Breath?
2 in, 2 out.
A reply came from behind a shutter. 1 long, 1 short. Not now. But the strings of shells moved gently in a wind that had not visited and stayed still when gusts tried to sell us a story. Someone was watching. Cousins. We moved on, not offended. We had east to find and south beyond it. And the bridge between both, held together by rust and people who had forgotten the cost of maintaining things. Chapter 15. The Bridge. That bites the style. Bridge sat like a jaw over the river's narrower mind, a drawbridge stuck down forever, because cable and power and the part of human that lifts had left. The deck was not deck. It was grating, steel teeth with gaps big enough to like a boot. The handrails had been snipped into garden fence by people with more optimism than plans. The sign that had forbidden trucks from bouncing on the span had fallen, now read in seaweed, "Forbidden." I looked at the grating and felt my laces like a threat. Den felt them too.
Unlace, she said.
You fall through to ankle. I don't want a loop stopping blood while we conjugate regret. I unthreaded to the last 2 eyelets on each boot, left the laces kissing the tongues, not hugging. We clipped short to the lower rail. If we went through to mid-calf, we would be bitten and bad, not bitten and gone. Den crossed first, feet placed like coins, stepping with the edge of the boot so the tread had something to read. The 4th panel in had learned Rust's sonata. Den's heel dipped. She went down to the ankle. The great bit leather. The leather bit back. She didn't swear. She didn't thrash. She reached calmly to the knife on her belt and nicked the lace, 1 cut, cheap and elegant. The boot came free. Her sock met cold metal. She lifted. She moved. She looked back at me with that small grin she wears when rules pay dividends. The boot came with us, trailing lace like a license foregone. Rule 75. Carry a blunt tip blade for cutting rope and laces close. Pointed knives think fights. Blunt tips think survival. My second panel had a surprise set by someone who knew that tired people stop reading ground, curved rebar welded into a fishhook under a flap of mesh. My pack's bottom loop found it like a dog. The hook held. The pack became an anchor, dragging the shoulder I didn't want anchored. The prusik caught.
I didn't have to admire it.
I shrugged out, let the shoulder strap go slack, swung the pack forward, unpinned the hook with the knife point, lifted the pack like a child. The rebar glinted. The river below pretended to have sympathy, which is a kind of mockery if you don't understand water. Den marked the spot with chalk, a big X on the rail where only careful eyes would look. She added our small mark under the span where rope could read it. 2 short, 1 long.
Not for us.
For the next hands that would find the same trick set by the same bad habits. Halfway, the bridge made a new offer, a squeeze spot where the grating had twisted.
Rails inward a touch, the root only a body wide.
My harness ring knocked hard against a rusted bolt head. I took off the ring, threaded it around, put it back, like sewing a seam. The cold bit the finger that did the threading.
I breathed. 2 and 2.
I reclipped. I thanked a harbour keeper's old advice. Thread in the calm, not in panic. On the far end, the deck went back to asphalt, pocked and patched, relief for calves. We laced our boots, minus 1 lace for Den, improvising with cord. Our feet felt like they might forgive us tomorrow. Rule 76. Retie when you can stand still. Laces loose are liability. Laces tight on teeth are prison. Choose when to be contained. After the wind changed script, it lost the iodine, picked up smoke, dry drift, mixed with something better. Onion, fry oil, nettle. A smell like kitchens when people agree to be in the same room. We stopped. Den closed her eyes and tasted the air like a wine judge pretending not to be thirsty. Home adjacent, she said, almost softly, because softness pays more dividends in wind than shouting. Chapter 16. The shape of home. Home from the river's mouth was not a skyline.
It was humility.
Low roofs behind dunes.
No banners. Shutters built like secrets.
Bucket lamps under slanted boards blink at knee height, 1 long, 2 short, sideways, to keep light off water. Rope strung waist high across the approach path. Flags made of old shirt, stitched with a pattern I didn't know and would learn. Den stopped us at the last hummock. We looked like people looking at something we wanted too much to trust our eyes with yet. The air forgot to lie a whole minute.
A gull argued with another gull about consequence.
The river accepted both decisions and kept going. Rule 77, don't arrive. Present yourself. The difference is the difference between being let in and being let go. We unbuckled blades and put them in the outside pocket, handles visible. We clipped our rope tails short, palms obvious. We did not shout. We knocked where knocking was a language, 2 short, 1 long on the post, with the shell strands. We breathed Harrow's count. We blinked under the bucket, 1, 2, 1, Union's code, not stolen, done right. A shutter cracked a hand's width. Eyes, then breath. 2 in, 2 out. The shutter closed. Footsteps like rope on wood. A voice from behind the dunes, not from air. Hands visible.
Rope ready.
Breath with us, we did. 2 in, 2. They matched. It's the closest thing to touching I've ever felt. 3 figures stepped into the slow light. Plain clothes, rope on belts, lantern under bucket. A small boy with a triangle and dot chalked on his knuckles because children get to make heraldry even when adults pretend not to. The woman in front lifted her hand, not palm this time, but fist open to palm, the rope people handshake. Den opened hers and mirrored. A line tied to a post, tug twice. Safe. Somebody behind the dune answered with a tug we wouldn't see. Not now.
Layers of talk.
A conversation of lines, names later, the woman said. Rules first. She pointed with her chin. An economy I love. No engines.
No lights above knee at night.
No air talk within ear of the road. Rope on the waist whenever you pass the causeway mouth.
No firearms inside.
Quarantine depends on breath, not temperature. We do brine wash at the threshold. You'll hate it, then you'll like it, then you'll hate it again. Children go first. The rest of you remember how to wait? Den nodded like someone handing over a cleverly wrapped birthday present and not telling what it was.
I put my hands out.
Salt water poured from a bucket over my wrists. It stung every paper cut I didn't remember earning. I let it. It smelled like childhood and penance. The boy with the chalk didn't laugh at my face, and I love him forever for that self-control. Rule 78. When you enter someone else's home, wear their rules like your own coat. Don't improvise at a threshold. They counted our breathing again while they washed our hands. Not because breath carries infection, but because breath is how you tell if fright is going to make a person ruin your careful work. 2 in, 2 out. Mira would have liked how non-negotiable this was. I promised quietly inside to like it for her. Quarantine?
I asked, not offended. A day and a night in the quiet house, the woman said.
We make the day interesting later. Today it's proof you can be bored without being dangerous.
After that, you get a rope and a job, and you keep what you know quiet until somebody asks.
You don't evangelize your old map. We have one. We can trade corners and nothing else. Den bumped my elbow with hers. Not gentle. Correct. We can learn, she said, and my mouth was glad not to show off. We stepped through the dune, cut where the wind forgot to be cruel.
Inside, the world had corners again.
Children's drawings on a shutter. A basket hung with shells that clacked and meant the door is a mouth. A square of sailcloth tacked to the wall with rope knocks carefully drawn. Harrow plus union. Riverfolk's slant language combined into a new grammar.
On a beam near the floor, a small triangle with a dot.
It happens everywhere children live, I whispered. Home anyway, because I am not as good at rules as I pretend. The word didn't break anything.
It didn't make anything either.
It just lay there like a coin under dust until somebody needed to lift it. Chapter 17. Knock to enter. The quiet house smelled like wood, wiped with brine and stove. The door had a bar you could set, not to keep yourself in, but to teach your hand what it means to be the person who doesn't leave in a hurry. A ledger hung by the threshold, breath counts, names to be chosen, marks for work I want and work I'll do. Den wrote rope in both. I wrote rope and then water and then radio only when begged. Someone had drawn a smudge next to radio with a smile under it. Jokes survive because they have better engines. Rule 79. Don't teach at the gate. Learn the knock, the light, the breath. Trade corners on day 3, not day 1. They gave us bowls, soup that tasted like the shore's idea of generosity, fish and potato and dill, December's away from seeds. We ate like people who were trying not to cry into salt. The woman who had greeted us sat with us for exactly 1 breath's worth of time. Anchor, she said at last, as if rewarding a dog with a biscuit, and the dog had done enough to deserve it. If your Juniper is here, she learned the rules that kept her. If she left, it wasn't because we asked her to. If you've never realized your blood is a person's name and heard it spoken by someone who isn't you, you don't know the feeling.
It's not lightning.
It's a river rising to exactly the mark you gauged for it and no higher. Relief is quiet if you've been doing it right. We slept with 2 other new people in the quiet house, separated by rope lines tied waist-high across the room. Not to imprison, to organize. Breath slow.
Rope still. Light low. Bucket lantern under a chair.
At some point in the night, the wind survived.
We did too. In the morning, they led us to the rope house.
A long room with posts set like commas and coils hung like punctuation. A woman with a handsaw smile named Mila, no more than that, walked the line pulling on Prusix until the knots had no choice but to be correct. She set the rules fast. 2 short, 1 long is still friend. 1 long, 1 short is still not now. 3 short is still help. The old codes got us here. We added 1 short and 1 long thrown on the ground by the door means you are scaring the children. Go breathe outside. Den fell a little in love with the post with the smoothest grain. She wrapped it in a hug the way rope people flirt. Mila pretended not to notice and failed adorably. We walked the causeway protocol, clip, breath, tug. We learned the flood walk, hand on rope, boots wide, face turned not toward the water, but toward the wind. We learned the kitchen clock. Knocks for soup. Work. Stop telling the story now. Stories? I asked. Mila's smile got more sore. We don't do the before for new people, she said. We do the how. You can cry about yesterday on day 5. Before that, we teach your hands how not to make new yesterdays for other people. Rule 80, mourn on a schedule. Survival first.
Remembrance after.
When people have enough soup, then you can tell them where you were when the lights died. Chapter 18. The Anchor. Lesson we made the small oaths after lunch. Not marriage or war, work. You stand under a beam and put your palm on the wood. You say you will wear the rope when you cross. You say you will not use air to say things the rope can say better. You say you will blink under your knee and not above it after dusk. You say you will touch the bucket before you touch the radio. You say you will count breaths with new people and lean on old ones, and you will let boredom be a teacher instead of a door. I put my hand on the beam. The wood was warmer than the room had any right to be. The boy with the triangle drew one on my knuckle while Mila wasn't looking. He drew it small, and the dot he put in it was a smudge because his chalk was tired.
I let it be.
Things at the gate should stay smudged. We fixed too much at thresholds. We asked for the list. It was simple and hundreds of pages long. No engines. No lights above knee. Breath count at door. Rope always at the mouth of the river. No firearms inside. Long blades piece-bound on entry. Short blades out of pockets while you eat. Trade in verbs first. I can mend, I can tie, I can listen. Nouns, second, salt. Wire, stories last. Children's corridors first. No work in their lanes during quick feet. Beacon discipline. 1, 2, 1 to call. Cut at the hour, never blink, for fun. Voice discipline, radio for rope failures. Not plans, wash hands like a covenant, not a chore. We nodded. We signed with our hands. Not names, palms, rope burn lines and calluses that told enough true. Later, after the lesson, after the soup, after the quiet house breath, in the space where afternoon shows its profile and night pretends not to be a promise, I walked to supervise 30 paces behind Mila's shoulder through the inner lanes.
I saw a pier that had refused to be beautiful and had decided to be present instead.
I saw a laundry line with clothespins made of drift, shaved to purpose. I saw a child's book with page corners turned down where rope was a word or breath or pocket. I saw a man sitting with his hands on his knees like he was relearning how to ask for work.
And then I saw her.
Not because I was good.
Because my body knows its own.
Juniper. Hair shorter, shoulders wider, eyes with more nouns in them. She was tying a bowline on a post without looking, and it looked like worship done right. She didn't see me at once.
That was good.
The rule isn't run, it's learn how to belong. When she did, the tide changed inside me. Not loud. True, we didn't crash into each other. We stood a breath apart and counted 2 in, 2 out, because that is what gets you across the bad bridges and through the whiteouts and into the rooms where rules are a friend. And she said my name the way the repeater never can. Rowan, with the weight in the first syllable and the care in the second. She put her palm against mine.
Her rope-burn lines matched a life I wanted to live. Home, she said, when it was time for the word to be used. Not safe, Mila said from behind us. Kind and exact? Not safe, Juniper said.
Home. Rule 81, when you get what you came for, don't drop your rules.
Keep breathing.
Keep tying. Let the joy be polite so it will last. The gate closed behind us without any thud. Ropes hummed. Bucket lamps blinked knee light. Children ran with triangles on their knuckles. We washed our hands in brine that bit like discipline. The quiet house became a place we had earned. The longhouse wrote our names on rope with grease pencil that moves when heat does. We were not done. We were something worse and better. Attached. That is the work Book 3 will make us do. How to stay, how to build.
How to say no that keeps people instead of punishing them.
How to enlarge a map without tearing it. The long way north had brought us to a door we didn't own but had been trusted to use. We knocked. It answered. The rope on our waist felt like a good sentence finally finished.